Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss.
And I'm Jessica Clemons.
And this is a breakdown of Daredevil Season 1, the first 13 episodes from the Netflix era back in 2014 that started it all.
And that is right, Jerica is back. That's both of our names combined if you haven't noticed. As Daredevil Born Again comes to Disney Plus on March 4th, and it's effectively a fourth season of this show, we're gonna go back and break down all of the Daredevil Netflix season 1, Season 2, and the Defenders, and Season 3, going episode by episode to catch you up with it.
Yeah, we started this journey in 2023, getting all the way through episode 6 of the first season. In this video, you're gonna see our breakdowns of those first 6 episodes as they were. Remote, separated into 2 squares. And then we're gonna pick up where we left off now in 1 square, here in the present day together. And if you wanna see an ad-free version of this breakdown and future installments of the series, join New Rockstars as a channel member. It's a great way to directly support our projects here. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's go down the road to Born Again. I think we got the wrong Marvel series.
Are they gonna sue? They can't sue us. It's on the same show now. It's on the same program.
All right, let's go back to the start.
We are breaking down Season 1, Episode 1, Into the Ring of Netflix's Daredevil. Okay, so first, the Marvel logo flips like pages through a comic book, and we hear the pages shuffling. Now, currently, and most often, the 2 different logos are for more of the MCU versus Marvel characters that are not in the MCU, like the Sony and Netflix properties. But this OG page shuffling intro is still on the Disney Plus roster all the way up until the first Doctor Strange movie. They use this intro up until the very first Doctor Strange, which is Phase 3.
They use this a lot, and I think it's a big reason why a lot of people in a lot of people's minds that all these titles were still part of the same broader Marvel universe.
So after that, we open on battling Jack Murdock, played by David Keith, walking through a chaotic traffic accident scene to find his 9-year-old son. A young Matt Murdock, played by Skylar Gartner, lying on the ground with his face covered in some toxic goo. We know now that that toxic goo is what blinded him all those years ago, and an elderly man says this.
Your boy, he pushed me out of the way. He saved my life.
This sets up Matt as a rare superhero who didn't wait until after he got his powers to perform acts of heroism. No good deed goes unpunished though, as the goo does make Matt lose his eyesight, and it's horrible. And in this really sad transition, we see the edges of the screen begin to meld and corrode like film burning in a projector. It's sort of scary, but the same chemical reaction it takes to burn the film kind of mirrors the same reaction the acid is giving to poor young Matt's eyes.
Yeah, totally. But you know what? If you think about it, the last thing Matt does see is a bright sky over this city. It does leave him with a kind of idealism that I think will fuel him as an adult attorney, a kind of hope that this city is not beyond redemption and that he has to stay in this ring and fight till the final round. And then from this we transition to the present day, a truly awesome scene that's just Matt talking in a confessional for over 3 minutes straight, mostly interrupted, and folks, this is acting! Charlie Cox plays the scene with tears in his eyes and pride in his voice, and you just know that he's gonna bring it for the rest of the series from this moment on. He tells Father Lantom about his dad's boxing career, how he was known for being able to take a punch, and as we see throughout the series, this is something Matt clearly inherited from his papa, because this dude is taking brutal beatdowns on the regs, and just like his dad, he always gets back up. This scene also serves as foreshadowing for Matt's eventual superhero persona, since he says his grandmother used to say,
be careful of the Murdock boys. They got the devil in them.
But I do think it's interesting to point out that Matt says about his dad,
Yeah, guys he went up against used to say I was like hitting oak.
which I think foretells his own fighting style, taught to him by another piece of wood, stick, like stick from the oak tree, you could say.
Yes.
And he goes on to say,
His eyes would go dead, and he'd start walking forward real slow, hands at his sides like he wasn't afraid of anything.
Yeah, just think about that. A fighter with inactive eyes, but a man without fear, slowly marching up to his enemies with his hands at his sides, unafraid. This is how Matt struts into that hallway kill box in episode 2.
Yes, I can't wait to even get into episode 2, but now it turns out Matt isn't here to confess his sins. Not at all. He's here to ask for forgiveness for something he's about to do. The most Godfather act that could happen, and this isn't a pilot episode, you guys. So then we jump to the docks that night to intercept some human trafficking. If you remember this horrible scene where Turk, played by Rob Morgan, says, I'm getting $1,000 a head for y'all, and then proceeds to offer them a bucket before forcing them into a shipping container. Turk is also a character from the comics if you didn't know, and he is still a petty criminal, a petty thief. And the opening shot of this scene is gorgeous. The city skyline framed between the 2 shipping containers really hammer home the fact that the crime and corruption have taken over this city. And we get our first fight scene of the series, and it is it's so good. It's so good and it's so funny. So the choreography is impeccable and it's so fast and so tight and yes, brutal, but I just love this guy seated, this Russian guy who's eating a sandwich and doesn't move during the entire fight, but who ultimately gets knocked out anyway. Maybe he should have just offered Matt some of his sandwich. I don't even know. It was so cartoony, but it's still so good. Additionally, Matt's Man in Black look is inspired by the Frank Miller Man Without Fear comics run. We go from Matt brutally beating the crap out of these guys, something he had mentioned his dad would do in the ring when he said something in him would snap, to the opening credits. Remember, the last time we heard Daredevil's intro music was in She-Hulk at the Daredevil introduction. We see the elements of his city forming in this blood-like paint. Genuinely, this is my favorite Marvel intro. Overall. Overall, I would arguably for a series, because the Black Panther Wakanda Forever intro is really good, but like this is the music, the look. I ate it up. Okay, so there's water towers, churches, skyscrapers come into view, along with the Lady Justice, portrayed here as she often is, blindfolded and holding scales. We also see an angel statue half covering her face, which is definitely giving me Weeping Angels from Doctor Who, if you guys have seen it. The creatures who could only move when they weren't being watched, essentially coming to life only when people were blind to their true nature. How is this not about Daredevil? The whole thing is set to this beautiful, haunting original score composed by John Passano and Braden Kimball.
Yeah. It stays with us. And I totally agree with you, Jess. This is just beautiful imagery that puts us in the right mood every time we watch. It's one of the few Netflix shows that I would not skip through the credits of.
I never did.
I want to get in that vibe every time. And this liquid that's bleeding over the city is actually meant to be the liquid that blinded Matt as a kid. This was according to Patrick Clare, the head of the design team behind this. They considered that toxic corruption seeping into the city with its reconstruction efforts after the Avengers battle in New York to be linked to the same liquid that poisoned Matt as a kid. And all of it here is just so visceral, so wet. Don't you feel like you need a bath after you watch this?
I do, but I love it. It's like PETA throwing a bucket of blood on me.
Please, yes, I'm gonna wear fur coats every time I can. But I just like this idea that every time we watch this episode, nothing in Hell's Kitchen is left unstained by the blood. All right, so as we start the episode, we meet Foggy Nelson, Matt's best friend and business partner, played by Eldon Henson, who you might recognize from the Mighty Ducks movies. What was it, 10 Things I Hate About You? Was that one of them? No, he was in She's All That.
He's also Idle Hands, a very niche movie for horror fans. Idle Hands, he's a great kid.
Yeah. Foggy calls Matt, who's still in bed. He's beaten and bruised from the night before. This really just sets up the ongoing theme of Matt's work life clashing with his double life as a dude who spends his nights beating down criminals. And this is something that we've seen other superheroes struggle with before, which just really shows the whole work-life balance thing, but in a new, much higher stakes light. And Matt and Foggy meet with the realtor, and we get the first mention of the Battle of New York in this series.
This office was barely touched by the incident, which is why it's on the market already.
So this is a big deal. We have to talk about this for a second, because when this Daredevil series was first produced for Netflix, it was under a different division of Marvel Entertainment than what Kevin Feige oversaw at Marvel Studios. All of the MCU references in these episodes would go in one direction. Like Daredevil would reference the Battle of New York, or Hulk, or Iron Man or something, but Avengers movies would never reference Daredevil explicitly. Now, all this would change after Netflix canceled Daredevil in 2018 after season 3, and then a couple years after that, the rights reverted to Disney/Marvel Studios, and that's when they brought in Charlie Cox to cameo as Matt Murdock in Spider-Man No Way Home and She-Hulk, and now the new series of Daredevil Born Again.
So Matt and Foggy argue over what kinds of clients they should be taking on, and just as Matt says he settled for one innocent client, we cut to Karen Page covered in blood, holding a knife next to a dead body. We find out later that that dead body was Daniel Fisher, who worked in the legal department of Union Allied. Karen is played by Deborah Ann Wool, who I think must have it in all of her contracts that she can only be introduced in TV shows covered in blood and crying and screaming.
God save me.
Hey, she just walked through the opening credit sequence of this show. You know, she just got covered in that blood.
And just screamed. Yeah, great idea. Great idea. Foggy gets tipped off by his cop buddy, Brett Mahoney, that Karen is there at the station. And Matt and Foggy swoop in to save the day. Matt uses his super hearing to determine that Karen is innocent, and boom, they've got their first ever client. We cut to off-duty police officer Clyde Farnham, which is also the name of an early Daredevil comic book villain, the Marauder. He's eating his lunch at a City Park chessboard when Wesley, Wilson Fisk's right-hand man, sits down next to him. Farnham owes money to the mobster Rigoletto, $28,957 to be exact. Wesley explains that now that Rigoletto is retired, Fisk has acquired his books and he's calling in his debt. He doesn't want the money he's owed, however. He wants to use Farnham to get to Karen. Wesley threatens Farnham's daughter, Tracy, by showing a live feed video of her being watched by a hitman. If you make deals with loan sharks, don't have children. That's like loan sharking 101, because they're just gonna come over there and hunt them and kill them. Wesley then comments on her Monet shirt, which is so creepy, but listen, hear me out for a second. He says,
"What is it about
college girls and Monet t-shirts.
Yeah, so art analysis plays a big part in this show, since Fisk meets his eventual girlfriend Vanessa, an art dealer, at her gallery when he's buying some art. Also, fun fact, at one point in his life, Monet developed terrible cataracts, which rendered him legally blind and unable to see most colors other than red, which is the main color he painted in during this period. He eventually had surgery to remove the cataracts and went back to painting his signature blues and purples.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jess, because in episode 5, Matt will explain to Claire Temple how he perceives the world as an impressionistic painting, what he calls a world on fire. And so we could totally see him as a Monet unable to close his eyes to the fire and trying his best to remember those water lilies. And I referenced the right Monet, right? Not Monet. Monet did that.
Yes, Monet did flower lilies. Right, Dash?
Yeah, Monet was trash. Monet was the best. On it. So we're back at the office. Matt and Foggy discuss Karen's case. Foggy wants to take a plea deal, but Matt says he believes her, which causes Foggy to tell Matt that he hasn't always shown the best judgment where stunning women with questionable character are involved, and if that ain't an Electra reference, I will eat my hat. But for Matt, he literally is Lady Justice. He's got the blindfolds on. He can sense through this supernatural ability whether or not people are telling the truth just by listening to their heartbeat, and it kind of makes us always fall in love with him. He did this with She-Hulk and She-Hulk.
Yes, he did.
It's like his coolest superpower. But back at the jail, Karen is attacked by Farnham, who wraps a sheet around her neck to try to make it seem like she hung herself, but this lady has claws, and she uses them to claw out one of Farnham's eyes and scream for help. Matt and Foggy legally threaten detectives Blake and Hoffman for almost letting their client get the Epstein treatment, but Blake doesn't take it too well.
I'll call the ADA. Will you take that tone with me again? I don't care if you're blind. I'll kick the shit out of you.
And so Charlie Cox ever so slightly smirks after he hears that, and I just love it because you know he's probably thinking how hard he would beat Blake if he ever tried to get into it with him. So Karen lays out the reason why everyone is trying to frame her or kill her. It's because she has evidence a union ally, her former place of employment, was using its government construction contracts to embezzle money. And you gotta wonder if any of these shady construction folks know Adrian Toombs, another guy involved with the salvage and reconstruction of New York.
Yes, Matt tells Karen that she can stay at his place because I guess Foggy lives with his mom or has a bachelor pad or something. I don't know why he immediately instigated, but whatever, go off, Daredevil, you fine as hell. Daredevil's DPs also love lighting a night scene. There is one thing to take away from this, a big thing from the pilot episode. Those DPs love lighting a night scene. The windows illuminate like daylight hitting stained glass, making Matt look like he's back in the church, like every moment of his life he's been spending in that church confessional booth. The light in the stairwell is literally bright green. Matt's apartment is illuminated by the giant light up sign that casts a heavy shadow on his red furniture. It perfectly contrasts with the green hallway, and it's just so fun, and it's dark and it's gritty. We see later on he does almost everything in the dark, and it feels like it's to give the audience the same depth, assuming that he doesn't need it, but we do. So when we see the fight scenes later on, keep in mind the people he's fighting can barely see. They're playing ball in his court and they are losing, baby. It's insane.
I love that.
It's so good. A pilot episode, you guys. Please go back and watch it after you watch our breakdown. I didn't expect the sexual tension between Matt and Karen to immediately hit like this. We know they had relationships in the comics and what happens further down the line, but this all felt like him and She-Hulk all over again, baby. Like,
He is a boy.
he is in the comics, he is in the Daredevil Netflix, and he absolutely is gonna be in Disney's MCU. I love him. I love him. So once seated, Matt tells Karen about his unfortunate accident that ultimately left him blind, leaving out the toxic goo details. This is where we learn later that Karen has something that Fisk needs, that flash drive of evidence. We learn that they're trying to discredit her by framing her for murder. Then after the second incident, they plan to make it look like a suicide, and hey, it's all swept under the rug, as Matt says. This is when the Daredevil chess game begins. Matt can hear Karen's heartbeat, and she's lying about keeping the incriminating files. You don't lie to your lawyer. That's like lying to your therapist. You don't do it. It doesn't help you. Right. We jump to Union Allied Construction, or at least one of their construction sites. It's literally an unfinished skyscraper, the most villainy grounded villain lair I've ever seen in MCU history. Here we have the drug lord Madame Gao, the brother traffickers Anatoly and Vladimir, Leland Owlsley, Wesley, and Nobu.
Yep, and when Madame Gao initially speaks, we do not get subtitles, which I really love because it makes me feel like we're just one of the villains there, but with her horrifying past, I wouldn't question anything she says. Also good to note that Madame Gao is a primary antagonist, squaring up with Danny in Iron Fist. She spans 2 MCU series as a supervillain, and she's awesome. Now, Leland Owlsley is featured in Marvel Comics as a shady businessman like he is in the Daredevil series, but he also had the power of limited flight due to a special serum that allowed him to glide for short distances, thus the word owl in his name. He also had slightly enhanced senses and talons. As a bird enthusiast, this would be my preferred superpower. But,
horrible. I would never want to be a bird that can slightly glide. That would be the worst superpower.
I want to be a flightless bird, just an emu. I just want to molt and just make people really uncomfortable by staring at them for too long. Then there's Anatoly and Vladimir, the other gangsters who we follow in this season, and Nobu, who doesn't really have stories in the comics, but later in episode 4, we see a tattoo representing the 10 rings, of course, you know, of the legend of that Shang-Chi movie that we all know and love, on Vladimir's shoulder. So these boys have been committing crimes for a long time with a lot of shady partners. We figure out through Wesley that this employer, aka Wilson Fisk, not only has business in insurance money embezzling, but in human trafficking as well. I'd assume all these crime and drug lords meeting in Hell's Kitchen must go through Fisk, so our man oversees it all. Now we get another mention of the first Avengers movie when Owlsley says,
"Heroes and their consequences are why we have our current opportunities."
Which applies not only to the 2012 Avengers, but also in regards to the Sokovia Accords. Villains like Baron Zemo flourish with the Sokovia Accords because it helped create a divide in the Avengers, allowing Zemo to slide in and control them even more. Villains are nothing without heroes. Every villain in the MCU in some way is formed by the hero. Literally and figuratively. While Owlsley celebrates the new vigilante, seeing that they can exploit the damages he may leave behind in Hell's Kitchen, Wesley questions it, knowing that Fisk won't like these inconveniences to continue. Anatoly and Vladimir have too much pride to even be working through Wesley. They question whether or not Fisk is doing a good job, seeing as their rival Prohashka is still in business and Fisk promised to take him out, to which Wesley responds, "We're handling it." Yeah, another death is upon us, my friends.
Yeah, anytime a villain says we're handling it, 4 people will die. Okay, so Matt with his super hearing hears Karen sneak out in the night. She snuck back to her apartment to retrieve the evidence. The flash drive was locked in an air vent in the bathroom. Kudos, Karen, good place in hiding. And the world's most horrible timing though, hiding in the shadows is one of Wesley's goons, the same man at the park watching Farnham's daughter rant. He immediately knocks Karen to the ground, but fear not, Daredevil is there. Woo! We get a fun fight scene in Karen's dark apartment until they're thrown out the window, hitting the fire escape poles, then hitting the cold, wet pavement. We slowly transition to young Matt in his childhood home, asleep on the small kitchen table in the same position he was on the ground. Some things just never change in the Daredevil universe. His dad has just come back from a fight. His face is completely pummeled. He wakes young Matt, who fell asleep studying, and right when his father says, "I never studied, look where it got me," you see the 2-part realization. A, his dad wants Matt to succeed so he doesn't have to follow in his footsteps. B, when he says, "Look," you see the sadness in his face because his son can't see him. So he raises Matt's little hand to feel his face crumbled and bleeding literally onto the kitchen table so he knows what not to do. This scene can also just be confusing because you're wondering what really drives Matt Murdock. And this is the pilot episode still, you guys, so we shouldn't really know, but we're starting to see it. At times it's his father, his values, his beliefs. I think it's all of the above, especially in this scene where his dad saw fighting as a curse and Matt slowly finds it as an advantage. These flashbacks will come out when big defining moments for Matt come through. The flashback ends with his dad saying, "Come on, Matty, get to work." Ugh.
Get to work. I love it. And just like that, Matt rises from the pavement and starts beating the crap out of Rance. Now, we've seen Daredevil fight so much from this pilot, but the choreography is still so good. In slow motion, it's highlighting the fact that this man can dodge swings from a knife. His hearing is impeccable. At one point, he hears the metal chains and he chokes Rance with it. Yeah. And Karen, rightfully paranoid, begs Daredevil not to take the flash drive to the police, so he takes it to the New York Bulletin, not to be confused with the Daily Bugle, because we know what they would do with it.
What would the Daily Bugle do with it? Just ruin it?
Parker, put it on my butthole!
Yeah.
I don't want to see it!
I'm leaving.
What the f***?
I'm done with this.
I didn't have a good one
done
in the chamber for that one, I'm sorry. But the New York Bulletin is kind of like the newspaper that gets featured in a lot of these shows. We saw it in Agent Carter, we saw it in Jessica Jones, and Cloak and Dagger, another Netflix Marvel-related series, and the flash drive is pinned to a barely conscious Rance. The New York Bulletin immediately publishes the Union Allied scandal. Didn't really fact check it, no time, we gotta get this to the press.
They didn't. It immediately dropped. They did not care. They were like, "Oh, there's a crumbled man with a pinned flash drive to him. It must be true." I will give them that. They did not double check their sources. But go on, continue.
So Wesley ties up the loose ends, and the next step on Fisk's road of destruction is figuring out who Nelson and Murdock are, because they are Karen's lawyers. Who are these guys? Later we see the real-time effect of Wesley tying up those loose ends. We see Leland transferring money and changing the accounts for Union Allied. Then we see Farnham with a gunshot to the head, dead in the kitchen. His poor daughter finding him this way. I guess this semester's a bust. Next we see Rance hung in his cell by his own sheet, getting that Epstein treatment.
Stop. Getting that Epstein treatment. Getting the Epstein 101.
A ton of people are stacking large amounts of packaged heroin. Whoa. These people are all weighing and packaging like an assembly line, and they are all blind. Madame Gao is an efficient one. All their eyes look like they've been purposely blinded with acid, and the scarring is a key detail. It definitely mirrors Matt's unintentional accident. We know Matt's gonna come in contact with this organization soon just because of this scene alone, and they've also been stamping each package with, what is that? The Steel Serpent logo. That is the heroin produced by the Hand. Of course, the villains of Iron Fist, who show up in season 2 of Daredevil and the Defenders.
I can't wait to get my hands on that heroin. When we're back at the empty law firm, Karen's made her grandma's recipe for the two boys, and again, this sexual tension, you can cut it with a butter knife. We begin to close the pilot episode with the newfound friendship and colleagues Nelson, Murdock, and Paige. Perfect closing to an amazing pilot. Matt enters Fogwell's gym. He takes his glasses off and starts beating the hell out of a punching bag. As the camera zooms out, we see the poster for Creel vs. Murdock, which is Matt's father, and that's the fight that he had all those years ago. The symbolism here, what got his father killed is knocking at the devil's door, literally, and he doesn't care. It's in his DNA, but it's also his way of life, and it's so sad. We see Nobu going over Hell's Kitchen, New York City. It's like an entire grid plan separated by different avenues and street numbers. The one highlighted seems to say Black Sky, and I found this out after a lot of Google translating, and we later find out this refers to the young boy from Japan found by the Hand in episode 7. We learn later in the season that this young boy is not your average child. Matt even noted his pulse sounded different, but he couldn't define how. It's clearly set up that the child is a weapon, and it's something very important to note for later in the season that we'll get into.
They established so much in this pilot. It's a really well-written, well-structured, well-directed pilot that like gives us a ton of information and hooks us into the world with all this mythology. I love it. And we see a broken-nosed Turk still healing from Matt's beatdown at the beginning of the episode, buying illegal weapons from the back of a truck, never a good sign. A white van speeds into a shot, and Anatoly and Vladimir get out, pull a man from his car, and beat him senseless. Vladimir kidnaps the boy and drives away as a dad lays beaten on the ground. And we cut to Daredevil overlooking this city with his super hearing, again, my favorite of his superpowers, and he listens to the citizens and hears the echoes of this young child, the same boy getting kidnapped. And thus the episode closes as it began, with a son crying out for a father. But this episode is titled Into the Ring, and here in Hell's Kitchen, the ropes bind all of us onto that mat. Matt's father didn't want his son to end up in the ring like he did, but now Matt, assuming the role as paternal guardian, is not about to let another kid get stained by the blood of this wet town. And this is a breakdown of Daredevil Season 1, Episode 2, Cut Man. We open on a trail of blood in an alley leading to a dumpster while harsh fluorescent lights buzz and flicker. We talked last week how literally everything in Hell's Kitchen is dripping with the blood of the opening credits, and those blood stains are literalized here on the pavement. Blood even drips from the dumpster edge, meaning that Matt must have further injured himself upon getting into this. And those buzzing lights foreshadow the fluorescent bulbs in the hallway at the end of the episode. Matt is the cut man of the episode title, both in his physical cut condition and in the term's definition in boxing, because a cut man is the person who treats fighters' wounds between rounds so that they can continue the fight. Matt plays this role for his father Jack, and Claire Temple plays that role for Matt. This is where we first meet Rosario Dawson's character Claire Temple, and she always brings a steady hand in these series that makes her a calming presence whenever she appears. And when Claire inspects Matt, there's an interesting effect where she shines a flashlight onto his eyes and his pupils do not dilate, tipping her off to the fact that he is blind. Now, according to Daredevil showrunner Stephen DeKnight, they toyed around with the idea of making her Night Nurse from the Marvel comics, but at the time Marvel wasn't really sure if they would use that character in the future, so they changed her to Claire Temple, a more obscure character from the comics, and they did a sort of composite mashup with elements of the two characters. Matt stops Claire from dialing 911 just in time, which is crazy considering it really is just 3 numbers. He knows from listening what those numbers will be, and when 9 and 1 begin, that means trouble's a-coming. Matt passes out, and the fight commentary carries us into a flashback.
Murdock has dominated this fight, but now Price has turned the table on him.
As if the announcers were commenting on his KO. This is a rare instance of young Matt pre-blindness, making the image of his father's beaten face one of the few visual memories he carries with him. Jack says,
"Don't get blood on your shirt."
In the future, Matt's cut man Claire gets blood on her shirt. This whole neighborhood is dripping in blood. Interesting detail, I like how inside the medical kit is gauze, antiseptic, and a deck of playing cards. Cards are used by fighters to self-test for concussions, showing us how often Jack has gotten the hell beaten out of him. So Matt stitches up his dad, and the wound makeup effects look so real that we're gonna have to blur it because YouTube freaks out at realistic skin punctures. I mean, this is gonna be a fun series to cover, but Jack makes his son swig scotch, setting up this poor Irish Catholic to go round after round with Foggy at Josie's bar. Karen catches Foggy singing The Pirates of Penzance by Gilbert and Sullivan in the office.
And to make us more than merry, let the pirate bumper pass.
This is the opening number of Act 1 of the show, and it paints Foggy as a huge nerd and probable Aaron Sorkin fan because Sorkin's always making characters sing Gilbert and Sullivan in every goddamn show.
You mean you should be out having a life, doing poppers and flapper dancing. I don't know what kids do these days.
Yeah, I'm Josh Lyman. So Matt wakes up and the camera pans from the couch, showing Claire sideways before writing the shot, leaving us, the viewer, just as disoriented as Matt is as he asks where he is, but really he is more worried that he is unmasked. Matt won't give her his name.
All right, I'll call you Mike.
Mike?
Yeah, a guy I used to date. Turns out he was very good at keeping secrets too.
This is probably a nod to Mike Murdock, who in the comics is the fake twin brother identity that Matt assumes. So Matt transitions from being regrettably maskless about his black covering to his youth being tortured by his eyes covered by white gauze. Here in this hospital room, he's flooded in green light. Whenever we saw Matt pre-accident, it seems like his world was lit normally, but anytime post-accident, like in his youth in these scenes and in his adulthood, the lighting designers go crazy, because all Matt sees is a world on fire, vibrant stained glass, a surreal world where nothing makes sense. This kid suffers from sensory overload from his enhanced hearing, where heartbeats are the dominant sounds. Somewhere it's probably Jen Walter's heartbeat that he's hearing. I know it. But Jack calms his son by letting him feel his face, like in episode 1. This is a bonding ritual between this father and son, and now it's being used to calm down the cut man. Young Matt says, "I can't see," which transitions to adult Matt gasping, "I can't breathe." His own heartbeat must be deafening to him here. Claire helps Matt breathe, and he explains that the Russians kidnapped a boy.
They've been running a human trafficking ring out of Hell's Kitchen. Took over when the Italians folded up.
Now, if we are reaching to connect this to a possible parallel MCU history, these Russians could be affiliated with the tracksuit mafia because one of the guys in that hallway he fights later is wearing tracksuit pants. And the Italians could refer to the Manfredi crime family, whom we saw in the 1940s in Agent Carter, and the same group who was foiled by Peter Parker in a deleted intro scene from Spider-Man Far From Home. Matt explains how the Russians took the kid to set a trap for him, something we never see. It's one of the rare violations of the show don't tell rule in screenwriting that actually works, because this is character development for Matt and Claire, and the episode ends with the ultimate no dialogue show don't tell anyway, making that a fight that, based on this exposition in this scene, is technically a rematch. Matt has had such a long night. All of this is really the second half of his night, after for most of us it would totally be over, and Matt's steady breathing has allowed him to attune his listening.
Someone in the building. A man going from door to door.
How do you know that?
He's on the 3rd floor already. Smells like premium cigarettes and discount cologne.
By telling, not showing in this instance, the episode traps us within Claire's fearful point of view, so it makes the idea of this smelly killer somewhere in the building even creepier, like Anton Chigurh in the motel in No Country for Old Men. And we flash back to Jack taking a beating in the practice ring, and the bell is so loud for young Matt, who still isn't totally used to his heightened senses. Matt is learning Braille.
Each grid is 6 possible dots, so each letter is a combination of those dots. You have to feel for what's not there as much as what is.
Yeah, Matt likens this with boxing, sensing where a punch could be going before it's thrown, but it's also a worldview that Matt will take with him. Like when his dad is not there, he must still feel for someone who's not there, or when a kid who should be safe in bed isn't there. Matt is the one who senses it. Roscoe and Silk drop in. Roscoe is Roscoe Sweeney, or the Fixer from the comics, known for fixing fights. Silk is a comics character of Sammy Silk Jr., who's a friend of Kingpin's son, who actually organized an assassination attempt on Fisk and outed Daredevil's identity to the FBI. These two set up a match with Creel. Now, we saw Carl Crusher Creel in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where he played the character The Absorbing Man, a guy whose skin takes on the property of anything he touches, and in the comics, he gets his power from Loki, and he later partners up and marries Titania, who we recently saw in She-Hulk. But this is the only episode of Daredevil where Creel gets mentioned. These two assholes say,
"You're young yet. Plenty of time to have more kids.
What can I do for you boys?"
And you know Matt totally heard this shitty comment from across the room in the background. We actually later cut to Matt's point of view at one point proving this, and since they pressured Jack into taking the money for his son, Matt's father's death will be guilt that Matt carries with him for the rest of his life. So back in the present, Matt knows that the fake cop didn't buy Claire's story, so he pulls an American Psycho and pew! It's such a brutal hit. I miss when Marvel superheroes could hurt people like this. And Matt can sense someone watching them young and scared, meaning that Matt can listen to Santino's heartbeat and know how young he is and know how scared he is based off that. At Josie's bar, Foggy calls Matt.
Climb off wherever you're on. Get down here.
Yeah, Foggy assumes that Matt is getting laid, but he's actually in this moment probably on top of a corpse, dragging him up to a roof. Because I know anytime I try to drag a couch up the stairs, I end up sitting on it. Pet that. Just nap time. So Karen talks about how she can't get the blood off her carpet, suffering from PTSD, tree, and the lighting of the scene casts both her and Foggy in red from the neon of Josie's sign, but it's like it's pulling them back into the bloody opening credits of Hell's Kitchen. But Foggy transforms that anxiety into something to set Karen's mind at ease.
These guys are harmless. That's Tom Belkin. He's the road captain in the Kitchen Hellions. He organizes the food drive every Thanksgiving. That's Clint Peterson. He is a criminal. But he's turning it around. We are this close to getting his kids into St. Agnes daycare.
St. Agnes Orphanage is where Matt goes after his dad dies. It's also where Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s Daisy Johnson grows up. Matt strings up the Russian on the rooftop by a water tank, and Claire admits she helped him because at her hospital she's been hearing stories of a man in black mask saving people, so she felt compelled to help him. And Matt says,
I know you're afraid. You can't give in to the fear. If you do, men like this win.
It's interesting that Matt discusses his moral reasoning behind his vigilantism right here, because either this rooftop or one similar to it is where Matt will be tied up in season 2 when he debates Frank Castle about where that ethical line really is. The transition comes with young Matt reading this quote.
There's a price to be paid for division and isolation. Democracy cannot flourish amid hate. Justice cannot take root amid rage. We must dissent from the indifference. We must dissent from the apathy. We must dissent from the fear.
These are the words of Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, part of his 1992 Liberty Medical Acceptance speech, and clearly Matt took that message of dissenting from fear to heart. But what really is the price to be paid for isolation? Because this quote does, in a way, inspire Jack to go win the fight with Creel, something that he does out of desperation, out of machismo, and an unsolicited hero complex, which ends up leaving his son isolated. I think he took the wrong message away from Marshall's words. Jack shows off his new boxing uniform, which he describes to his son as red, really red, foreshadowing Matt's future choice of his own costume, and he says,
The thing about red, I can't tell how much you're bleeding.
Who says I'm even gonna get hit?
Or Murdock's. You get hit a lot.
Jack calls his bookie, telling him to put all the money on him to win by knockout, knowing it'll probably mean his death by the Mafia. And after making the call, notice how Jack leans back and an Italian flag is framed behind him, some of those Italian mafiosos whose world he's about to blow up. Jack then calls Matt's mother to look after him, saying, I know what I'm asking. Now, what exactly happened with Matt's mother is explored later in the series, but in the comics, Maggie Murdock suffered from postpartum depression that turned into paranoia, and she actually tries to assault the baby, and she ends up leaving the family to go become a nun. So depending on where exactly Maggie is in her life, again, Jack is not making the best choices for his son here. Drunk Foggy and drunk Karen walk the streets to kill some time.
After what you told me, I'm never going home again. Men are waiting in the dark corners of this world to prey on us.
As he says this, they pass under some red light, the bloody world of Hell's Kitchen, saying, oh, go ahead, you joke want to be Josh Lyman, but these few blocks of Midtown Manhattan with our failed UCB location are gonna mess you up. On the roof, Claire is now masked up in a Shy Guy look that looks even scarier than Matt does. She's clearly gotten over her reservations real fast and helps Matt torture the Russian.
Try stabbing him in his trigeminal nerve.
Where is it?
Going through here, right above the eye. You want to go in right under there.
How will I know when I find it?
He'll tell you.
And Matt brings the guy over to the edge and tells him,
I need you to know why I'm hurting you. It's not just the boy. I'm doing this because I enjoy it.
This convinces the Russian that he is dealing with a psycho, and he spills the location of the kid under the Troika restaurant. And Matt actually drops this guy in the same dumpster he himself was found in the beginning of the episode.
Is he dead?
He'll live.
Yeah, this tells us that Matt wasn't entirely sure when that guy landed in the dumpster if he was gonna be okay. And as Matt slowly limps off to possible death, we cross-dissolve into his father in the tunnel before his fight. When he goes through those doors, he's bathed in light because he is walking right into that afterlife by doing this. And we see this fight from Matt's point of view as he listens to it on the TV. No images, just the sounds. And after knocking out Creel in the 5th, Jack rushes back to the locker room for a quick getaway, but he cannot help but take in the crowd's chanting of his name. Sadly, these precious seconds probably help the mob catch up to him later in the alley. And like the ring of the bell in the gym earlier, now Matt jumps from the sound of the gunshot in the street below. And for one last time, Matt feels his dad's face. Ugh, heartbreaking. He switches from repeating dad to the more childlike and innocent daddy, pleading with him. And now, this is it. The most iconic scene of the whole series, a 5.5-minute long take of Matt giving the business to the Russian traffickers in a hallway. Right now, I'm speeding through the whole thing so that you can see it in all its unbroken, glorious entirety, but I'm gonna break it down here beat by beat, because there is so much good attention to detail in the way this is directed. First off, remember, Matt is going into this fight already wrecked, several broken ribs, some lacerations that have only just started to been stitched up, and a freaking collapsed lung. But this sequence begins by smartly smartly giving us a geography of the hallway layout, where exactly the kid is, those Russians playing cards in the other room, everything Matt has to get through to get to this kid. A Russian brings the kid his meal, and we hear that kid crying for his daddy, just like we've been hearing Matt do this episode, and the steals his apple. And Matt enters, arms at his sides, just as he told Father Lantom last episode how his dad would always enter the ring, arms at his sides. The cut man has crossed into the ropes. Yellow and green fluorescent light fills the space. And as Matt passes the first room, his head slightly cocks to the side as he registers everything he can hear about those inside. Matt swings open the door and goes to work. The door swings shut though, allowing the stunt double to swap in seamlessly. And the stunt fighter here is Chris Brewster, who also did stunts in Captain America Winter Soldier. We don't see what goes down at first, but the door breaks open when Matt throws a guy through it. That apple thief marches down the hallway, and Matt, able to hear him approaching through all that fighting, times the throw of a microwave perfectly so that it hits the guy in the head. Think about it, Matt threw an appliance into an empty doorway, knowing that a guy's head would soon be there. Now, the camera glides past Matt, and one would think that they could conceal a cut here, but according to Chris Brewster, they did all of this in a true oneer, shooting 12 takes of it. So they might have stitched together some different takes, but every take you saw, they did it all the way through, which you can totally see in their physical exhaustion as they go, which is why they choreograph a beat here where Matt is on the ground catching his breath and the Russians are regrouping too, and then Matt continues to fight through them. One of them actually comes back behind Matt, and Matt throws the gun at him, and the guy falls back and knocks the camera a bit. They keep it in because it proves how authentic this all is. It's a small number of Russians, but they keep getting back up, which is more realistic for a fight. They just keep getting more and more tired as they go. Matt could end it faster by using one of these guns to shoot them, but he doesn't because he is a non-lethal killer, at least he tries to be. But really, I think he just doesn't want a stray bullet to hit the kid. And as the fight continues, it's interesting how the knockdown door gives a strong diagonal element to the scene, a springboard for all these fighters to leap off of. And as the fight enters its final act, at one point Matt leaps from the wall to punch someone, and you can see he's just spent. He has to lean against the wall just to hold himself up. And so now the Russians are able to grab him and get in some solid hits. They take him back into the room, and again, we don't see into that room, but Matt comes back out and does an impressive acrobatic flip kick, and then punches a guy until his final hook throws him back into the room, where stuntman Brewster swaps back out with Charlie Cox, who sells this exhaustion to finish the scene. And perhaps my favorite detail, before Matt goes in that kid's room, he raises his mask because he doesn't want to scare the kid. And he knows that for him, being able to sense his father's face was the only thing that could calm him down. And as he carries the kid out, he steps on the door, which after several minutes of several ripped dudes leaping off this thing, the door finally now breaks as Matt steps on it. Like as he walks away, you can see, only now is it snapped in two. Our cut man has finally broken down the door of the crime of Hell's Kitchen. This is a breakdown of Daredevil Season 1, Episode 3, Rabbit in a Snowstorm.
After last episode's awesome action-packed hallway fight scene, this week gives the fighting just a little rest and instead focuses more on the law, playing out kind of like an episode of Law and Order. It's very cool that this show can live in two worlds, both an action and an illegal drama, kind of how Matt himself moves between two identities. We open at Whitestone Bowling Alley. The color white plays a big role in this episode, and in the first shot of the ball return feels like it's straight out of the Big Lebowski. This entire scene feels like a really horrific Big Lebowski. The first person we see in this episode is mobster Prohaska, who owns the taxis in Hell's Kitchen. If you remember in the first episode, it's mentioned by Anatoly and Vladimir to Wesley that Fisk promised to handle him. Spoilers, he's gonna get handled real soon.
Oh, yes, he is. Prohaska bowls a game while his two bodyguards stand by. Now, this frame does not go his way, as John Healy butts in, asking to play, and he doesn't take kindly to being told it's a private game, and Healy kicks the bodyguards' booties. Healy is inspired by the comics character of Alvin Healy, who goes by the moniker Oddball, and dude is scrappy as hell for a little guy. He pulls a gun on Prohaska, and we flash back to 36 hours earlier.
That little 36 hours earlier just feels like it came straight out of a Tarantino movie.
Yeah, between the Coen brothers and Tarantino, this is one thing that like this early episodes of Daredevil always do. They always bring in these appropriate stylistic influences that just shows there's a lot of cinema craftsmanship going into this. So Turk now opens this box of guns, which reads, firearms contained in German. Look, I know I look like I'm someone who just can speak German all the time, but I don't. I have to look this up. I promise I have to look this up. Now, Turk is a little worse for wear after his last run-in with the Man in Black, but that didn't stop him from selling these crappy guns to everybody. 11 of them are already gone, and Healy tells Turk that he prefers a good revolver because they don't jam up. And as Turk assures them this won't jam, we get Chekhov's jamming gun because we cut back and it does exactly that. To be fair, Turk did just say,
"This baby will not jam, or my name ain't Turk Barrett."
In the comics, he goes by several aliases, so this tracks. Sometimes his name is not Turk Barrett. And this gives Prohaska a chance to smack Healy with that bowling ball and says, "This is how he negotiates, huh?" Referring back to how Wesley said they were going to be negotiating in episode 1. Now, yeah, we know what that meant. Prohaska gets taken out with the very bowling ball he was bowling with just moments before, and as the cops arrive, Healy hides his gun under a pinball machine with a sick-ass red 70s Barracuda on the side of it, and immediately asks for a lawyer. That's how every episode of Daredevil Born Again should begin. Just someone doing something horrible and asking for a lawyer.
Yes. I also only knew this was a Barracuda because for some reason in a lot of the Marvel Cinematic movies, they choose a 70s Barracuda, a red one. I don't know why. It's happened like 2 other times, but they love those 70s Barracudas. We're only 3.5 minutes into this episode, and one of the biggest takeaways is the sound design. If you haven't yet, please rewatch this episode. Listen to the first 3 minutes of this episode because they wanted to make sure every sound was crisp, insistent, and pulsating. When the bowling ball comes out of the ball return, it sounds like a car in a tunnel. The low sounds of an empty bowling alley, the woman spraying the shoes, the light music, the pins crashing, even the crunching of the man's spine when Healy flips him is so tumultuous. If you closed your eyes, every cut could make sense, and I think this is done to alert your hearing. Daredevil heavily relies on his hearing, so we're really feeling those sounds, It's like in your chest. It's like how we saw him fight in the dark all the time. It gives that same depth to the episodes that aren't only in the storyline, but in the finished physical products. I eat this stuff up, you guys. I took sound design in college. Then we get back to the best intro that I've ever seen, which I'll never stop talking about.
We must pay the toll every time we watch one of these episodes and watch all the way through these title cards and just gush on this gushing, because it's the best gushing that you've ever seen. So Matt is now doing some deep thinking outside the church until Father Lantom, still probably thinking about how Matt said he was about to do some bad stuff in the confessional. Father sits down next to him and tries to bribe him with an espresso if he just talked to him about the previously stated bad stuff. Haha, nice try, priest. You're not gonna trick me. It also says behind them, Holy Eucharist, Sundays, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., which the body and blood of Jesus Christ is truly present on the altar as bread and wine. Like, I know this is church, but that's set up perfectly between them. Why is that? Because he's Catholic, and if you don't confess your sins, you're not supposed to take the Eucharist until you've confessed your sins and done your penance. That's the rule of Catholics. We got rules. You gotta follow them. So Matt, have you truly done your penance? Until you do, you can't go get Jesus. So we were introduced to Ben Urich, played perfectly by Vondi Curtis Hall. Such a great character. Can we get him to play Ben Urich in Born Again and just pretend like that all little oopsie this season won't happen? Anyway, in the comics, he's a reporter who works for the Daily Bugle, the same newspaper as Peter Parker, which has changed to the New York Bulletin for this show. Urich meets up with Silvio, an old school Italian mobster who reminisces about the good old days.
Me and the boys driving in Friday nights. Kings of the castle.
Kings don't have bodies in the trunk.
Tell that to Macbeth.
Yes, Macbeth. Referring, of course, to Macbeth murdering Duncan and ascending the throne. But also, there's at least one other king who has bodies in his trunk, and we're gonna meet him at the end of this episode. Silvio is Silvio Manfredi. We talked about him in a past episode. We saw the Manfredi crime family in Agent Carter, and it's the Manfredi crime family that Peter Parker disrupts in that deleted sequence at the beginning of Far From Home that I still consider to be MCU canon. Silvio tells Urich that some new player in town is killing off the competition, and he's getting out of Dodge. Silvio and Urich both represent the old guard. There used to be rules. Fisk represents the new guard, which follows no rules, and is way more brutal, and it needs to be dealt with in a new way, with Matt's similarly brutal style. Criminals used to play by certain rules, and Urich used to expose those crimes in the free press, but as we're about to see in the court case against Healy, when the deck is stacked in the criminal's favor, sometimes the only way to make things right is to fight fire with fire in a world on fire.
Oh, in a world on fire. In the Nelson and Murdock office, Foggy comes in, still hungover from the night before, which means this episode is happening directly after the events of the last one, which is crazy because again, Matt was messed up. The fact that he's even walking around today is just a miracle upon itself. Also, how badass is Karen that she's in the office looking fresh and not distinctly hungover? Look at her. Beautiful. You can even still see the imprint from the prison bed sheets are still on her neck. So she's having a hell of a week. And really, Foggy needs to stop complaining because of the 3 of them, he's been living it on Easy Street, 110%. There's a knock at the door and it's Wesley, Fisk's right-hand man. He uses a jaunty knock that feels evil despite him probably hoping it had the opposite effect. Behind him is the door with Atlas Investments logo, which is a shout out to Atlas Comics, which eventually evolved into Marvel Comics.
Aha.
Wesley comes to the office to hire the guys and he really makes good use of this college degree using this sense right here.
I represent a consortium with diversified interests in the private sector, both domestic and international.
Yeah, calm down. Don't be stupid. It's not the SATs. you're just being an asshole.
So Wesley wants to hire Nelson and Murdock on retainer to represent Healy in all his bowling ball bashing glory for a lot of money, and Matt is understandably a little wary. Now, this is good TV. We are playing Daredevil chess. This back and forth is so entertaining. It sets up how big of a figure Wilson Fisk is, but also leaves room for speculation. Why did he dive so deep into their backgrounds? How does he know about Karen's charges? How does he know about the intel Foggy gets from his cop friend? Wesley's leaving no room for error, but completely digging himself a big hole. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that Wesley and his employer are dirty, crooked people. So that is why Matt follows Wesley outside and tracks him by the ticking of his Cartier watch. And even through a freaking jackhammer, construction, and just general city noise going on as well, he's able to hear it all. A similar Cartier watch goes for $6,800. And this excess stands in direct comparison to Nelson and Murdock being broke and Ben Urich struggling with his wife's medical bills. Crime pays, kids! And as Wesley gets into the car, we see the first glimpse of Fisk. It's very Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget right here. It's just his hand, just his cufflink, which will come into play in a big way down the line, and specifically through the cufflinks is how the MCU reintroduced Daredevil in that episode of Hawkeye. This guy speaks through his cufflinks. So Matt is bleeding through his shirt as once again his job and his vigilantism collide, but he makes it into the precinct to meet Healy just as Foggy decides he doesn't want anything to do with him. But Matt is desperate to find out who Wesley works for, so he takes the case, and we're gonna get to see some good old-fashioned lawyer in this episode.
Chunk chunk! In Ben Urich's office, he argues on the phone with his insurance, and in the background we see a framed article with the headline "To the Battle of New York" in reference to the Avengers, and another that reads "Harlem Terror," referencing the events at the end of the 2008 Incredible Hulk. Daredevil does not care about they're like, we'll put in every Easter egg. We want you guys to know. Ben argues with his editor, Mitchell Ellison, played by Joffrey Cantor, about the kind of content that they should be publishing.
There used to be a time when the people in this building wrote the hell out of the news.
Everybody we know is making twice what we are, writing for blogs, working from home in their underwear.
And again, we get that old versus new, the sense that Ben is being replaced by a more brutal world and with no room for the pleasantries and rules of the past. Matt talks with Healy about attorney-client privileges, saying this.
Then you know anything you tell us stays in this room, just like church.
Matt gets visibly uncomfortable at the mention of church, no doubt thinking back to his most recent confession and his earlier rebuff of Father Lantom's desire to speak with him some more. Which is interesting. Is he losing faith in himself or just religion? Values versus belief. It's a lot.
Interesting, yes. And Healy wants to go directly on trial when he's indicted, because as we'll see, he knows that he'll win no matter what, and he also refuses to tell Matt anything about the man footing his legal bills.
As for the man who hired you, all you need to know is his check's gonna clear.
Wesley goes to retrieve the gun from the Whitestone bowling alley, and this guy knows his arcade etiquette.
I got next.
And back at Nelson and Murdock, we go over the materials at hand, as a lawyer does. The pros. 1. The bowling alley girl working during the murder was in the back office until the killing was done and didn't really see anything go down. 2. Healy has defensive wounds. 3. The men who survived the goons refused to talk. Nelson and Murdock are ready to go straight to court. We jump to the lawyer for the company formerly known as Union Allied, who tries to pay Karen off for, framing her for murder and trying to have her killed, strong-arming her into signing an NDA and taking 6 months of salary to put it all behind her. And here's where Karen has to deal with her own moral compass. Will she take the deal, or will she continue to try and be a hero? We know what happens to heroes in Hell's Kitchen. They get beat up.
They get a bowling ball? Oh, well, that guy was a villain. That guy was still a criminal. The guy that got bowling balled. But there are innocent people that keep dying.
Don't be a hero.
Or you're gonna end up at Metro General Hospital. Here with Ben, his wife is there and clearly a long-term patient. We don't know what she's ill with, but he's trying to make sure she can get a private room with assistance through their insurance. Back at Nelson and Murdock, they're going over Healy's case and how they're going to handle it in court. Foggy mentions wanting to win this case and get more money, and Matt's like, absolutely not. Money isn't everything. And it feels like morality is gonna be a big part of this episode. Like, it's a big part of the entire season, but this episode specifically. The distinction between right and wrong is really important because Karen is dealing with the bribe, Foggy constantly looking the other way when money's involved, and Ben's having to sacrifice his career as an honest journalist to keep his job in order to take care of his wife. This is important because we start to learn everyone's motivations, what really drives them, which we're not really seeing from Matt right now. He's not really asking whether it's right or wrong, he's just doing it, which could be why he's avoiding confessing to Father Lantom in the first place. He's just doing it without thinking about it. Once the Wi-Fi comes back on, we're looking at Foggy's page on the New York Penal Law Code, specifically the use of physical force in defense of a person. It's the longest, most boring looking document I've ever seen in my entire life, and this is exactly why I'm not a lawyer. I could not read that full thing.
So we're at the courthouse with the shakiest camera footage I've ever seen. That Steadicam and the New York winds have zero chill. Foggy gives his opening statement, and Matt starts listening to the heartbeats in the courtroom. Sorry, Foggy, you're boring, but this...
God damn.
But this case is all kinds of funky, so he knows how to play both sides, a vigilante and a lawyer. That's when we see one juror very nervous with a very fast heartbeat, and she is the mole. Get her! Later that evening, the blackmailed juror meets with one of Fisk's lackeys who reassures her that she doesn't want whatever's on a tape of her when she was 19 to get out. She's clearly at a loss and having a hard time coping with the fact that she's doing something supremely illegal. But again, when morality is put to play, she chooses to save herself, which is what I would do too. So clearly no shame there, other than, you know, helping Jeffrey Epstein. But thank God, Daredevil comes out of nowhere and he starts beating this man up. He tells him to get rid of the footage. He says he can't, and this man reveals that he doesn't really know his employer. He just does the job. And Daredevil does the job too. He forces the man to get the juror excused, and like that, it works. She's excused. Also want to note that this man in the window just watched Homeboy get his ass kicked by a man in a mask and did absolutely nothing.
He's literally standing there in the dark in a window, just watching this all happen.
Watching. Then we get the icing on the cake, the whole enchilada, the whole reason we're doing what we're doing in this show.
I've been preoccupied of late with questions of morality. Sometimes the delineation between the two is a sharp line. Sometimes it's a blur. And often it's like pornography. You just know when you see it.
Morality. It comes down to morality. We're wrapping this episode up in a bow of morality, bringing Karen, the juror, Foggy, Matt, and even Ben's morality to the forefront of this episode. So Matt lays it out. The jurors are important, and their judgment is important. And let it be known, his client is pretty freaking guilty. So it's up to them to decide now.
We cut to Leland and Wesley in a car speaking, and truthfully, right here, this is when I noticed it. Though he's a very scummy person, Leland is a really great villain. He thinks in a very logical, although horrible way. He's extremely transparent and quick, which mirrors his main job, which is constantly switching illegal accounts. Wesley reminds him, with Rance, Fisher, McClintock, and Farnham, they're leaving way too many dead bodies behind, so they need to stop killing people like it's an accident. Then we learn their game.
It's not their experience that matters. They just opened shop and they're completely clean.
They're using Nelson and Murdock because they're clean. No one can trace it back to Fisk when the boys have such a clean record. Then Karen thinks it's a great idea to go see Miss Fisher, the wife of Daniel Fisher, the guy that died in the first episode. She's currently moving and she's still mourning her husband, which is all very sad and cumbersome. She reveals that she signed the former Union Allied NDA that Karen was offered because she wants to keep her children safe. And wow, it's almost like morals are the common theme of this episode. It is everybody choosing. Okay, I understand. I would do the same thing too.
And we should mention that Owsley, played by the same guy who played Warden Norton in The Shawshank Redemption, a guy known for tricky accounting. That's what did him in on that show. So it's just kind of a perfect casting. Everyone in the show, so well cast,
there you go.
Has a great body of work behind them. I love it. But we're back with Ben Urich, who got good news from the hospital, but in walks Karen Page, and she wants to talk about Union Allied. Her moral compass is pointing right, and Ben is absolutely interested. We're back in the courtroom for the verdict, and Matt knows Wesley is there by the sound of his expensive watch, which is insane. That's genuinely very cool. I love the scene. It's my favorite power. He's got great hearing. He's just a good listener. Just a good listener. Right? Oh, that's all we just
that's
need a good
why
listener.
that's how he's a boy. He's a great listener.
Then he hears another fast heartbeat, and it's that older woman in the jury, a new mole. She causes a hung jury, and Healy outwardly, sarcastically commends Matt for his beautiful speech earlier now that he's off the hook. And here's where it gets gross. I've seen this episode, and I know you have too, and this is when Daredevil gets dark. This scene is almost too inappropriate for TV. We're gonna be blurring it out here in New Rockstars because YouTube doesn't like this. As Healy is planning to leave, Daredevil sneaks up behind him, and they start going at it. Dumb Healy picks up a bucket and a lead pipe in the middle of the fight. What'd you think was gonna happen, bro?
The loudest instrument he could have ever picked up. It's like picking up a drum, which is a horrible idea because Daredevil hears it and immediately they get back into the fight and Healy is losing. This is when they finally reveal the name to Daredevil, which is Wilson Fisk. We knew it. Daredevil didn't know his name yet. He stabs Healy in the chest with a broken shard of a mirror he was swung into. This horrible fight is concluded when Healy clocks out by throwing himself eye first on a serrated, jagged metal spike on a fence. Brutal.
I mean, come on. Could you? No one would ever do that. No one would just. No one. That's how. I mean, that's the best introduction to a villain ever, right?
It literally. This show is so good. We're 3 episodes, Eric. We are 3 episodes in, and this is a very horrifying way to die. But I'm also like, oh, we now are getting the feeling of how horrible Wilson Fisk is. That you're so afraid that you gave up his name that you have to get rid of yourself this way. Continue. I love the show.
So then we're introduced to Vanessa, soon to be Fisk's everything. She's an art dealer and is currently drawn to Fisk immediately. Vanessa tells Fisk a children's joke of when you hold up a white piece of paper and you ask, what is this? And then you say, a rabbit in a snowstorm. The title of this episode, which could summarize how Wilson Fisk feels like a rabbit in the center of this Hell's Kitchen mess. This is one big ass rabbit and he blends in with the city because everything everything is as corrupt as he is, so he never stands out. He's a man in the shadows by being ironically framed in the brightest color. It's so bright, it's overwhelming, you can't see anything. It's a world on fire for someone who is blind. They hear so much screaming, so much pain, and they can't single it out. But what's horrifying about it is he believes he's helping the city. So maybe he believes he's the innocent rabbit just being stuck in a snowstorm. That's why he wears the color white. He believes he is morally pure on this crusade when he is anything but. And what does he tell Vanessa this painting makes him feel? Alone. Alone. Alone.
Ew, stop. Ew.
That's what he is. He's so overwhelmed, he's just alone. But it's also a pompous statement. He's alone at the top of this pyramid. He's looking down on the rest of the city. And also could, of course, be a call out to his past with his father, which we'll get into later. Daredevil, Season 1, Episode 4, In the Blood.
We open on, which I assume is Yutkin prison in Siberia, 8 years ago. Anatoly, one of the Russians in the Fisk crime circle, is dragged down a hallway and thrown in a cell with his brother Vladimir. This episode opens and closes with Anatoly in rough shape, but while the opening presents the rock bottom as a jumping off point to greater things, the ending does not. It doesn't at all, and it's horrific. Okay, so Vladimir is presented here as the tougher of the two brothers, even though he looks like he's younger than Anatoly, and the same stubbornness and determination that causes him to pry a rib bone from the deceased cellmate to use as a makeshift knife is what ultimately leads to his brother's death later on. Oh God. He also has various tattoos on his arms and chest. We see them on both the brothers, along with a lot of the other Russian crime mobsters. And one of them is actually the 10 rings on Vladimir.
He's got some Kree tech shout out. We're now learning more about
Oh my God, that's true. That's true. He has Kree tech literally shouted out. He doesn't know yet. Well, he'll never know, but eventually.
He's like Jack in Lost getting a tattoo that he has no idea what the characters mean.
Oh my God, he's stupid. The star tattoos that are displayed indicate that they're made men in the Russian mafia. These guys were into some shady business even back in the day. Anatoly says this. Foreshadowing his fate at Fisk's hands, but right now Vladimir is optimistic as he grabs a second rib bone from poor Alexei. God, stop doing this! For his brother to use in their escape. Oh God, here's another clip.
Нам надо смотреть вперед, к будущему, к Америке, где мы будем управлять, как короли.
And I love this. In the subtitles, Kings is capitalized, but these two make a grave mistake in their choice of partnership when they get to America because there's only one room at the top for one king. Now, this show could easily have made the Russians your usual underdeveloped thugs, you know, of the tracksuit variety, whose only motivation is to do the crime, get the money. But Daredevil ain't your average superhero show, my friends, and by letting us in on some of the brothers' backstory, it serves to humanize them a bit, and we understand why later on it's so hard for Vladimir to go to Fisk to ask for help and why he sends his brother instead. These aren't the kind of Russians who just get shrunken and eaten by owls at the end of the show. We get to know them. And we cut to Hell's Kitchen, present day, and we see how these once fearless Russians are now afraid of the man in black who's making business hard for them by throwing bodies onto the hoods of their newly acquired cabs. Claire is still in hiding and still playing cut man to Matt, and you gotta wonder if she takes insurance or if she just gets paid in long smoldering looks. I'd happily take that payment if we're talking about Charlie Cox, but she tells Matt this.
You really need to get some kind of body armor or something.
It'd slow me down too much.
So will a bullet.
Yes, this foreshadows Matt's eventual suit and Fisk's body armor being the thing that saves him in the end from Anatoly's knife swipe. Claire and Matt do some flirting in classic Daredevil fashion because, as we pointed out, he is a boy, and this dude just cannot help himself.
That's why you keep ending up here.
Well, maybe I just like the sound of your voice.
Claire chucks his shirt at him and he catches it with one hand, just like he did with that brick in Spider-Man No Way Home. The one-handed grab, the second coolest power after listening. So Prohaska's kitchen cabs are having the signage switch to Veles Taxi to indicate that they are under new leadership ever since his run-in with the bowling ball. In Slavic lore, Veles is the god of the underworld. After the rise of Christianity, he became identified with the devil, Mephisto, but really foreshadowing a certain devil of Hell's Kitchen who is going to be raising some hell in this Veles Taxi garage later this episode.
Yes, Wesley stops by for a visit to tell the Russians that Nobu and Gao are pissed with them because they haven't handled the one man in black. Like, oh, Will Smith.
Take a walk.
Play this clip.
I mean, if he had an iron suit or a magic hammer, maybe that would explain why you keep getting your asses handed to you.
Pretty sure he's talking about a different guy with a hammer, not this one. This is obviously yet another reference to the Avengers, this time Iron Man and Thor. After telling the Russians not to use Fisk's name, Wesley's eyes twitch when Vladimir uses it again. Dude is absolutely gonna regret that he said that. Trust me, Vlad, you'd much rather just deal with Wesley on his own. Do not deal with Fisk.
So Wesley leaves, and Vladimir tells Anatoly that the reason Fisk doesn't want anyone to say his name is because it would reveal that he's just a man. But When Anatoly fights Fisk later and slashes at him with a knife, he is wearing body armor, which gives the illusion that he has supernatural abilities. So again, Vlad is definitely gonna come to regret downplaying what a threat Fisk actually is. We find out that the man Matt dropped off the roof 2 episodes ago is named Simeon, and he's currently in a coma at Metro General, the hospital where Claire works. Karen meets up with Ben Urich to ask what he thinks about the NDA the Union Allied lawyer is trying to get her to sign, and scene takes on a master and apprentice vibe right off the bat. The old grizzled veteran and the new optimistic rookie feeling each other out.
You pretty much brought down the Italian mob back when I was in diapers. Whatever happened to that reporter, Mr. Urich?
He got old. And a hell of a lot less stupid.
So the Russians visit Simeon at the hospital, and he is in bad shape. You gotta admire the fact that Daredevil isn't afraid to show the actual damage aftermath of a superhero ass kicking. The brothers inject Simeon with epinephrine to wake him up, and he has gotta be in a lot of pain. They ask him about the man who did this to him, and he says, yes, the first time we hear someone refer to Matt by this moniker. Simeon tells him about Claire, and the 2 Russians break into her apartment. She's obviously not there, but poor Santino comes to the door and gets tortured for information. This kid's having a bad week.
Yes, and we finally see Wesley and Fisk together. Though we haven't gotten an entire scene with Fisk, the main villain of the season, until almost halfway into episode 4, which is insane. It is the first season. It's more reason why this show is amazing. Fisk and Wesley talk a little business in the car, and then Fisk arrives at Vanessa's gallery.
You stay with the car.
Sir.
I need to attend to this alone.
Wesley is so crushed that he's not invited on this courtship attempt, and you can't help but feel bad for this guy for just a little bit. He just wanted to play wingman to his best friend, his best man, his bestie. Fisk talks with Vanessa, and this scene really lulls the viewer into the false sense of security with him before the end of the episode pulls the rug right out underneath you.
How are you enjoying Rabbit in a Snowstorm?
I hung it in my bedroom. It's the last thing I see every night.
That's either very romantic or very sad.
Yeah, the viewer is thinking that with his soft-spoken nature and his shy vulnerability, maybe he's not as bad as all the others have made him out to be up until this point. Now, Fisk wears black here, while Vanessa wears white, a color palette that continues throughout the series when they are together. And as he stands in front of the painting with the mix of reds, he stands out, whereas she blends in against the white wall. He is out of place, but she is in her element, making him seem even more vulnerable in this moment. The red painting also looks a lot like what Matt sees when he describes his world on fire.
I wanted to thank you for it, personally.
Is there anything else I can help you with?
No, Yes, I was actually wondering if you cared to join me for dinner.
Notice how Fisk approaches as he thanks her, but when she seemingly dismisses him, he falls back. He's like a widow boy, gutted from slight rejection before regrouping and asking her to dinner. Just a cool bit of acting from Vincent D'Onofrio.
Vanessa turns down his offer to dinner, but when Fisk goes to leave, she seems surprised that he gave up so easily. She clearly wants him to flirt a little bit, but again, he's out of his element. In the criminal world, he's always in command, but here he's thrown off his game. She tells him that a man once offered to buy every painting in the gallery if she'd go out with him. Here it is.
A woman that can be bought isn't worth having.
I am that woman that wants to be bought. This charms Vanessa though, and she agrees to date after the 2 of them hold eye contact, something Matt and Claire did earlier when they were flirting. This episode shows a lot of parallels between Fisk and Matt, and we'll get into it even more later. The 2 of them introduce themselves.
Vanessa.
Wilson.
Notice how Fisk hesitates before he responds, uneasy with anyone knowing his true lonely self, which serves to humanize him a bit, lulling us and Vanessa into a false sense of security regarding who this man actually is.
So we jump to Claire and the cat she's allergic and very mean to.
Eat it, you little bastard.
This cat knows something is up as he searches the room and meows. A slightly tense Claire pops a Benadryl and we see something outside her fire escape moving around past her curtains. Just look to the right, Claire. It's Vladimir and Anatoly's men. We then cut to Foggy and Matt leaving the 3rd Precinct Police Department. The lanterns outside are green. The reasoning behind this green light has evolved into the NYPD precincts normally have 2 green lights hung outside the entrance to symbolize the watch is present and vigilant. Foggy tells Matt, "Did I tell you my mom wanted me to be a butcher?" A story he's told plenty of times. Later in season 3, we'll get a ton of glimpses at Nelson's meets Foggy's family-owned butcher shop, so he really could have been cutting his own brisket or whatever. And again, Foggy is only in the game for the money. He mentions hating being broke again and comparing the rate of a butcher to what they're doing as lawyers.
Then Matt's burner phone rings, the one Claire can use in case of emergencies. When he picks up, it's revealed the man we saw in the fire escape has made his way into Claire's home and drags her away, scratching at the floor and trying to escape. This scene is horrifying. It is horrible. I hated watching it. And a reminder that Daredevil only gets more grim from here on out. It's like watching that scene in Taken, but like 10 times worse because it's not Liam Neeson. Also have to point out, not every cab is owned by the underground criminal ring, but this one may be. Though we're seeing the side of the cab that doesn't have Velas Taxi on it, there's another shot of a different taxi cab that is operated by Velas Taxi that looks absolutely identical. So Foggy may be getting into a car he is unknowingly very closely connected to and is owned by an underground criminal ring. He could have died. There's a lot of opportunities Foggy could have also died, but this one is very important. Matt speeds to Claire's house, tossing his cane directly into a trash can and parkouring his way to Claire's apartment, which is legitimately insane because he must have memorized the layout of where to jump and where to latch onto. She's not there, but he finds her phone on the ground, and that cat is still at large but remains innocent in my eyes. I love this guy.
Matt either memorized the layout or he's just hearing the ghosts of all the people who tried to parkour over this, who died, who are whispering, jump here, jump there, don't jump here, now, jump down. Just all the Michael Scotts and Andy Bernards who are like, don't make the same mistake we did. So Matt opens the window and begins listening to the sounds of Hell's Kitchen like he did in the first episode to find that boy. Through the din of casual chats, car horns, a busy New York City hustle and bustle, he makes out a pair of men speaking Russian, and Matt unmistakably hears the name Santino in their conversation, and he feels that guilt. He's like, I'm sorry, I had to bring that boy into this. The Russians have closed their trunk with Claire in the back and drive off. Karen is now in an auction house. Her plan is to get any information on the Union Allied, and this place is auctioning off all its liquidized equipment. She looks incredibly sketchy with a notepad at an auction house, not bidding at all. You'd think someone would be like, get the hell out of here. Additionally, she's sketching people's faces because she doesn't know their names, which seems even more literally sketchy. Thank God Ben Erik is there to assist this small piece of advice.
Eyes front, Jesus.
Who are they?
Don't know. But they aren't bidding either. Spend the next hour raising your paddle. Win something, one of the smaller lots.
Ben didn't know she'd be there, but was trying to get any information he can get as well. Then we jump to Velas Cab Service, the home base of their shady operations. This is my favorite part of the shop. The Russian half-nude portraits of models on the wall. Very car shop mentality. Not a family-friendly place to leave your kid playing his Game Boy.
Don't leave your kids at car shops. Don't leave them at car shops. There's gonna be weird nudes on the walls.
I'm a man now. So they release Claire from the trunk, and again, it's horrifying watching Rosario Dawson struggle in their arms to survive. Netflix Daredevil just gets so dark.
Matt finds Santino a little beaten up, and Matt raises his glasses to show him his face the way he raised his mask in a previous episode so the kidnapped little boy wouldn't be scared. He begins speaking to Santino in Spanish and finds out the name of the taxi service that took Claire, and he's off again into the night. Meanwhile, we're taken to, I'm sorry if I pronounced wrong, Brazier? This is a real place in New York City, and it unfortunately closed in 2015 once Daredevil dropped, but Brazier is French for brewery, which is funny because Vanessa and Fisk are going there for Italian. On that date, a waiter pours some wine for Fisk to taste. Fisk confesses he doesn't really know wine, and we know it's because he comes from humble beginnings, new money. Fisk says he's been too preoccupied to date, and he rubs his cufflinks. We'll get into why these cufflinks are so important on our road to Born Again, but remember, we got super eerie close-ups of them in the last episode.
Yes, they're his Horcruxes.
Vanessa and Fisk begin talking about Hell's Kitchen, mainly how Fisk wants to change it for the better. Boo. For people like Vanessa, he makes a comment about the city being part of him, that it was in my blood, the title of the episode. Then they cheers to making a better place of Hell's Kitchen. This episode frames Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk as two sides of the same coin, both hometown boys who were defined by their traumatic events in their childhood, who now want to clean up their city. Although their means and methods vary, they're really not so different. This episode shows they're both capable of violence and vulnerability, lawlessness, and love. A psychologist would tell you Fisk's true intentions and motivations are not in fixing the city. The cufflinks and his goals are tied to the same event and are like his Nexus event. It's like his Nexus. It always has to happen in order for him to do whatever he's doing, and the cufflinks are his Horcrux. Ugh.
Yeah, that's right. They're the key, they're the Horcruxes, they're like the activation button, they're everything. Mm-hmm. You really could just have a pair of cufflinks walking around with just floating in the air. We would know that it was still Wilson Fisk. I'm telling you, go Gadget, but Dr. Claw. I'll get you next time. Devil of Hell's Kitchen next time. So the silence of the last scene is completely shattered as we cut to Claire, bloody and beaten. She isn't one of the people like you Fisk was talking about, apparently. They are beating her up to get information on Daredevil, his name specifically, and Claire knows the fake name he gave her and still refuses to share it with the Russians after being beaten up and tortured. She is what Hell's Kitchen needs. The women in the show are putting their lives on the line for the city with no powers.
Absolutely none.
They're not even good listeners. I don't know.
Yeah, what? How dare they? How dare
they? Claire is a good listener. So Sergei then tells Claire this.
This gives me no pleasure, it really doesn't. But I have been given a job to do, so please answer the questions that I was told to ask.
I will begin breaking you.
Which feels right out of Rocky IV, doesn't it?
I must break you.
Then Daredevil evens the playing field by turning off the lights. Now, he's clearly outnumbered, but remember, he fights just as well in the dark, and these guys clearly don't. The Russians decide to turn on the cab lights so the yellow beams bounce off the people in the cement, so the DP having the time of their lives setting up this shot. The orange from the street entrance, the blue from the emergency lights, the yellow from the street light. Additionally, notice the light bouncing off the ground. They had to make the floor wet to do that. This is movie magic.
I'm obsessed with these things. I eat it up. Knowing damn well the lights were turned off on purpose, in the most villainous laugh, Claire chuckles and tells them to ask Daredevil his name themselves and cue the beatdowns. Keep in mind, all these people Daredevil begins beating up drop their guns. It allows the other men to even pick up the guns, but Daredevil never picks them up because guns are beneath him, and he's better than that. He's even making noise in different areas to distract them as he picks them off one by one. He's like a cougar in the night. In the midst of Daredevil trying to teach Sergei a lesson, Claire swings the metal bat he used to scare her directly across his head, and as a doctor, I'm sure she knows she did some immense damage, but that doesn't matter right now. She's upset, angry, scared, shook, and all those emotions are coming back as adrenaline slips away, and she breaks down into Daredevil's shoulder as he comforts her, and it's so heart-wrenching. I hate it. I don't like it.
So we're back at the Square Diner where Karen and Ben are meeting after the auction. Karen put $3,500 on some old office equipment and billed it to Nelson and Murdock. It's revealed that the former Union allied is buying back their own equipment. We get some backstory to Erik here, but just a very small amount. Karen mentions an article he wrote about a woman in which he responds that the woman had the worst fate, marrying a workaholic that never appreciated her. Speaking about himself. Now, I know the B storyline feels a little dull in retrospect to Kingpin and Daredevil gruesomely killing people, but you know, it all makes sense, especially at the end of this season. Karen is the one who sucks Erik back into the intrepid investigator reporter life, and therefore, when he is ultimately killed, she'll have that on her conscience. Something that is underscored with the sound design of this scene. Jessica did a great job talking about the sound design last episode here. Notice there's some police sirens that come by right as he's considering this, foreshadowing the crime scene that he will eventually fall into. R.I.P. We leave Karen and Ben agreeing to lay low, but continue the work to take down the Kingpin. So once back at Bella's taxi cab service, Anatoly and Vladimir stroll in to see their men beaten half dead with empty bullet shells everywhere. Pyotr has relayed to Anatoly that Kingpin is out and about. Anatoly tells Vladimir that they need Fisk's support. Clearly the man in black is Wayne, and they've now officially lost him 3 times, but Vladimir refuses and Anatoly goes to Fisk to grovel. And we're back with Vanessa and Fisk, and if you haven't noticed, we got 4 concurrent stories going on in one episode. It's like the Act 1 finale of West Side Story. Fisk is gonna crush a skull tonight. Is that the episode where the explosions happen and then he's like, oh, you embarrass me? So we've got Claire, Kingpin, and Vanessa, Ben and Karen, and then Daredevil in the middle of it all. It's the 4th episode and they are doing a great job balancing 4 storylines at once. Fisk lures Vanessa into having zeppa inglese, an Italian sponge cakey custard dessert that's normally for children's parties, but he's a big boy. He likes
He's a big boy.
The lighthearted date is interrupted by Anatoly. He stumbles in completely ignoring Wesley, and this is a big reveal that 80% of the men at this restaurant are working for Wilson Fisk. They stand up, guns out, prepare to protect. That's how important this man is. His goons pretend to have dinner for him. He made it look like this is a normal date, which rightfully unnerves Vanessa at first, but you know, deep down she's like, okay.
She comes back. At first, I hated that at first she was like, oh, this is a little too much. And I was like, girl, you are gonna be on top of this at the end of the series. You are literally the one orchestrating all of this. Do not act like this scares you. You are so into this. And also, I think me and Vanessa are the same person, heart to heart, which is so horrible. I know, I'm a monster. I would have been with Wilson Fisk. Either ways, we come back to Nelson and Murdock where Paige shows Foggy their new, old, fax machine, what she bought at the auction. Foggy, in a heart-to-heart moment, tells Karen his mom's butcher story again. In a reversal, Matt now patches up Claire. This isn't gonna feel great. He tells her a gentler version of her, this is gonna hurt to him from a previous episode. And like they even mentioned, this isn't new to Matt. He's been patching people up like his dad since he was a child. Matt says, I'm just trying to make my city a better place. Almost exactly what Fisk said. They're different sides of the same coin. I'll say it once, I'll say it again. But I feel like we already kind of knew this. Like, of course they're the same person. Additionally, Claire begging him to tell her it was all for something. He doesn't really have an answer, which is the true essence of street level grounded vigilantism. Like, you take out one scum drug lord leader, another pops right back up in his place, taking each criminal one day at a time until you meet your match, sort of like Matt did with his father.
And it's interesting seeing the simple contrast between Karen and Matt versus Claire and Matt in his apartment. When Karen was there in the first episode talking about the case and evidence against her, the giant billboard illuminated white and pink, but now that white can symbolize innocence while yellow, like we see now in this episode, has been linked to optimism and hope, which I think Claire is trying to get across to Matt, that he needs to have hope. Matt finally tells Claire his real name, probably because he senses they're gonna bone sooner or later, and she should know his real name because he's finally at a point of trusting her now that she fully trusts him. It's worth noting that both Matt and Fisk tell their potential love interests their first name in this episode, again framing them as similar men with similar hang-ups, rarely feeling safe enough to reveal personal details about themselves to those around them. Unfortunately, the awkward date between Fisk and Vanessa is over. Fisk walks her to her apartment, and you see his guards behind them. This is when Vanessa gives him the no-go once she realizes he might actually be a bad person, and Fisk is pissed! He's mad because the date was going smoothly until Anatoly showed up. He's angry, and he needs to take care of this problem. We're in a car with Wesley and Anatoly. Anatoly recaps what happened between the cab service and Daredevil. He wanted to talk to Fisk so they put the past behind them. Remember, they kept saying they'd take on Daredevil, and Fisk handled his end with Baraska, so someone's not fulfilling their duties, and it ain't Fisk.
Yeah, Wesley says this to Anatoly.
They say the past is etched in stone, but it isn't. It's smoke trapped in a closed room, swirling, changing. The past can never be completely erased. It lingers, like the scent of burning wood.
If the last episode was questioning morality, then Wesley literally just summarized this episode in his monologue. The past can never be escaped, and it always comes back in a different form or place. Our perception of it changes. Daredevil is completely driven by his past, so is Kingpin. This could be a nod to even Wesley's origins, but we know Anatoly and Vladimir have been messing up in the eyes of Fisk. Then he had the nerve to ruin that man's date. Hell no, the past can never be put behind them now. It will keep coming back, and they will keep messing up. If there's one major takeaway from this, Fisk never forgets. He's like an elephant. Fisk rips Anatoly out of the passenger side door and beats the living crap out of this man. It's not even fair. Anatoly didn't get a single hit in, just a single slice of Fisk's suit. All of this because of Vanessa. This man has goons kill for him, and he doesn't do his own dirty work. So you know you've messed up badly to get Kingpin to deliver an ass whooping like this. He also still has that mentality of a little boy. He tells Anatoly in the middle, beating him up, "You embarrassed me in front of her." A child, a literal child. We see over time how important Vanessa is to him, but this should be noted for how finicky his temper can be. He'll literally smash her head in a car door 22 times. I counted. He slammed Anatoly's head 22 times in the car door, and it would have been more if he wasn't decapitated on the 22nd one. And you see this all in this episode. In a horrible shot, we see blood spray on Wesley's collar in the dark. Like this episode's title, we're all in the blood, literally standing in it, smothered in it, pour it onto our shoes, into the New York streets. The last thing Vladimir and Anatoly exchanged before this was a short argument, and it's all sad.
Drop by drop, all of the architecture in Hell's Kitchen are going to be covered in blood by the end of the series. That's a promise that we're seeing delivered on again and again throughout the series. It's just so incredible. They're recreating the opening title credits. I love it. And then Fisk says, "Tell Potter I'll need a new suit." And we'll see Melvin Potter on our road to Born Again. He is a designer that makes Daredevil suits later in the show and a well-known figure in the comics. Fisk looks at his reflection in the car window, and we know from a later episode that he's seen himself as a young boy just after killing his papa. This is what he sees every time he looks in a mirror.
Papa, Papa, no! Papa, no!
I'm sorry, Papa. Papa. Okay, Daredevil, Season 1, Episode 5, World on Fire.
We open on Claire wiping shower steam from Matt's bathroom mirror to examine her various bruises. It seems like the episodes in this show always take place directly after the previous one. It doesn't give us a break from anything to catch our breath, so that's why everyone's bruised and always limping. So this is Claire the morning after a traumatic encounter with the Russians, which she clearly still working to get through. She stayed the night at Matt's place, but we see some blankets and a pillow folded up on the couch, so it's clear they didn't sleep together. Yet. Matt's being a gentleman by making his battered house guests some breakfast, and Claire asked this.
You have a job or something to get to? Or are you one of those billionaire playboys I'm always hearing about?
This is an obvious nod to Tony Stark, who revealed to the world that he's Iron Man. But it could also be a nod to comics like Batman and Green Arrow, since it's been established that the DC movies and comics exist in the MCU. Matt explains that he's a lawyer with his own practice, so Claire should be happy. I mean, she doesn't know that their practice is broke and has 0 clients yet.
And in this scene, Claire is truly the voice of the audience. She's asking all the questions you always wish people would ask these superheroes. Like, how the hell are you a lawyer by day and a vigilante by night? And hey, how do your abilities work? And to the show's credit, Matt actually gives her an amazing answer.
You just open one of the cuts on your back.
How do you know that?
I taste copper in the air.
He also explains that he can tell that she doesn't have any broken bones because he can't hear any grinding, which is kind of gross because you gotta imagine this guy's walking by, everybody with broken bones being like, ooh, ew, ew. But he uses all these senses to feel the balance and the direction, the temperature vibrations, stuff he hears and smells. It all equals superpowers. It makes sense to us. And then we get the exchange that's every VFX artist's nightmare.
All of the fragments form a sort of impressionistic painting.
Okay, but what does that look like? Like, what do you actually see?
A world on fire.
Hey, you just said the title of the episode. Yeah, so here we get another art reference, which is an ongoing thing throughout this series. Last episode, we made the point that they're trying to show Matt and Fisk as two sides of the same coin, and Fisk got his own art-themed episode, Rabbit in a Snowstorm. Matt's painting is fire, Fisk's is ice. It's also worth noting that Matt's walls are devoid of any art, which will come into play later when he goes to Vanessa's gallery to do some recon, and he pretends he wants to buy art to warm his apartment up.
Matt asks Claire to stay with him until he can figure out a way she can stay safe from the Russians, and they finally kiss, and they kiss on the lips. And you just know the next time we see that couch, it is not gonna have guest blankets and pillows on there. Claire asks Matt another question the audience always wonders, which is why doesn't he just go to the police? And he tells her that wearing a mask and beating on people doesn't exactly mesh with the police policy. But we at least get some semblance that Matt has some sort of long-term goal for all of this when he says this right here.
Maybe I only need to take down one man.
Fisk?
Cut off the head of the snake. Body thighs.
Oh, you sweet, naive man. Anyone familiar with the MCU knows another similar saying when it comes to villains. Cut off one head and two more shall take its place. That's the Hydra motto. But it can apply here too, given that Fisk is in a league with Gao and Nobu and a whole bunch of other baddies.
Now, Claire says that when the Russians were beating on her, she heard them say the name Vladimir. And we cut to the man himself, who doesn't yet know about his poor headless brother. Cut off one head and you've got a super pissed off Russian on your hands. Wesley shows up and proves he's a man of many talents.
There's still a few small details we'd like to iron out before.
Where's your brother?
Dude, his brother's blood was splashed on your face last night. Wesley would make one hell of a poker player. Vlad responds.
Last time I saw him, he was heading to see your employer.
Vladimir now catches himself before saying Fisk's name. Smart move. But this is a lesson he learned too late, since if he'd shown Fisk the respect he demanded all along, his brother wouldn't be doing his best Marie Antoinette impression right now. Because you know when Wilson Fisk bashed Marie Antoinette's head in a car tour, they don't tell you the history you learn. It's cool. It's not right. So Vlad's goon comes in to tell him that they found Anatoly, and then they bring him in. Damn. Vlad has got to see his brother without a head. Pretty harsh. In Anatoly's pocket is the Man in Black's mask, playing right into Fisk's plan. Vlad says to put every man he has out on the street to find him and bring him his head. And we cut to the bloody credits, and then cut to Anatoly's blood being hosed off of Fisk's car. And there's like bone and brain in there. It's just gnarly.
I can't do it. Okay. Gao, Nobu, and Leland are there, and you just know Fisk is letting them see this bloody scene as a power play move. He tells them that the Russians are out, and he's the guy who took off Anatoly's head, and they're understandably super pissed that they weren't consulted beforehand, or beforehand, I guess. This whole scene is shot in the handheld shaky cam style, which makes it all more unsettling and disorienting, which is no doubt how Gao, Nobu, and Leland all feel during this conversation.
We all knew that we would need to eliminate the Russians one day. They were too unpredictable.
This from a guy taking heads off with the car door.
Once again, I love Leland's smartass style here. He just tells it like it is, and I think he's a great character for this show. Him and Wesley are great characters for this show. Fisk smooths things over with the promise of more money for all, and we get this ominous line from Nobu.
Remember your promise to me and those I speak for.
Fisk is playing a few different angles, and we'll find out more about this one later on in the series.
Yep, next we get another classic Daredevil one-shot action sequence, and it's just as awesome and as mind-boggling as the hallway scene was. We start on one of Gao's blind drug runners right into the backseat of a Russian taxi cab, and he's singing this hauntingly beautiful song. So this actor is Mang Ai, and he's singing in Mandarin the song Kangding Chinga, also known as Kangding Love Song, a popular traditional folk song from Kangding, China, written by Wu Wenji. The lyrics talk about a lovely maid with a sweet smile that the blacksmith's son comes to court. He came to court her in moonlight. Moonlight shines bright, a courtship in moonlight. And the following scene with Matt fighting these Russians can be considered a bit of a courtship by moonlight. The camera starts inside the cab right next to the singer, and it swivels back and forth, and it's just super cool. Like you can't even see the camera or the crew or the cameraman in the rearview mirror at all. At one point, it does a full 360-degree turn, and Matt is just standing there like a jump scare in a horror movie, you know, like in, I think it was Paranormal Activity 3, where the camera is pivoting back and forth on the fan, and then it's like right there behind her, and then the sheet drops down, and it's kind of appropriate given that the Russians now see him as some sort of boogeyman, the Baba Yaga, if this were John Wick, cutting off the heads and appearing out of nowhere, and when the camera swivels back around, Matt is now poof, gone. And again, this is just all one long unbroken take. The show really does an awesome job finding some interesting and different ways to shoot things that aren't just your typical action fare, and I hope they continue this trend in the new series, Born Again on Disney+. Matt takes out the Russians one by one, and at one point, this singer is sadly shot. Just more bloody collateral damage left behind. Matt questions one of the men as to Vladimir's whereabouts.
Please, I tell you what you want. Just don't cut my head off.
So this is Matt's first indication that something is up, but the cops show up and he doesn't get a chance to get more answers, and he does the next logical choice for info.
Hey, you guys hear anything on the news about a Russian getting his head cut off?
In Hell's Kitchen?
This city. Bad enough you get mugged. Now they chop your melon off. What's next? Groping corpses?
Dude, Matt, your office small talk needs a lot of work. It's bad, it's horrible, get it up, not the way that you think. That groping corpse line is definitely a nod to what happens to poor Julie Barnes in season 3, which I talk about a lot, and I love it. I don't love it. I don't like what happens to Julie Barnes. It's just crazy. Okay. Let me go back. Miss Cardenas comes in to get these guys help. She was referred to them by Brett Mahoney's mom, the one Foggy keeps buying cigars to, even though he's not supposed to. The slumlord Armin Tully is trying to drive Miss Cardenas and the other low-income residents out of their apartment complex so he can put up the condos. This is just more evidence of Fisk's plan to clean up the city for the right people, like he mentioned to Vanessa last episode. Karen translates for Miss Cardenas, even though Matt also speaks Spanish, and he tells her,
Do you want to do this?
No, I like listening to your voice.
And that dirty dog. That's exactly what he told Claire last episode. He is running out of lines. Get your game up, sir. Hate you.
That's why you keep ending up here.
Well, maybe I just like the sound of your voice.
Boy, boy. When Matt says this to Karen, even Foggy rolls his eyes inside. I rolled my eyes. Everybody's rolling their eyes. He's seen this before from him, no doubt. Absolutely not.
Matt and Foggy agree to take up the case, and we find out that Tully is repped by Landman and Zach, the law firm where the guys used to intern that also offered them jobs that they turned down so that they could form Nelson and Murdock. Matt says he'll go to the precinct while Foggy and Karen hit up the law firm. Foggy likens the lawyers to sharks, and Matt says,
try not to splash too much. It attracts them.
Yeah, splashing around is exactly what Matt is doing at night as a man in black, and it's getting the attention of Fisk in a big bad way. Matt goes to the precinct to ask for files on Armin Tully, but he's also really there to listen for any info on the headless Russian. As Matt sits and waits, behind him is a poster that reads, "You don't have to reveal your identity to solve violent crimes." So appropriate for a masked vigilante. I think one of my favorite shots and Easter eggs in this whole season. Matt is also one of the superheroes who doesn't register as an enhanced human after the Sokovia Accords are passed, so he chose not to reveal his identity. And in She-Hulk, our man was very, very defensive of this whole idea of superhero privacy. Over Brett Mahoney's shoulder, we get our Stan Lee cameo, a framed photo of him as a decorated police officer. Matt hears detectives Blake and Hoffman interrogating Peter, the Russian he beat down the night before. Peter asks them if they know who he works for. The cops don't care about Vladimir and Anatoly, however, which is the first indicator that these guys maybe know more about what's going on in the criminal underworld than they should.
What if I give you another name?
He'd have to be big.
He'd have to be King freaking Kong.
Big and King, really taking out any ambiguity over who Peter's gonna name. So obviously Peter gives up Fisk and things go south immediately. The detectives pause and then Blake undoes Peter's handcuffs, which is never a good sign. If you're ever in a movie and a cop undoes your handcuffs in a private interrogation room, you're in trouble.
Whose turn is it?
Yours.
I thought I took it for that thing in the bodega.
Oh shit, yeah. All right, wait, come on. No! What's that, Jesus? Oh my God! What's that?
You really shouldn't have said his name.
Yeah, unsurprisingly, these detectives are in Fisk's pocket. And there's this cool shot of Matt standing up to react just a moment before the gun goes off, and every cop behind him leaps into action behind him in slow motion. And you just know he has a ton of things going through his mind. He already saw that Fisk can get a jury to tamper with a trial, and now he's starting to get the scope of what he's up against. So Karen and Foggy go to Landman and Zach. Landman and Zach. Such a stupid name. I hate saying that. Ugh. Which is huge and stands in direct contrast to the Nelson and Murdock office with its old ass office equipment and rats chewing through the phone lines. And when we meet Marcy Stahl, one of Tully's lawyers and also Foggy's ex, who is unfortunately very racist.
And did Mrs. Carnitas tell you?
Cardenas.
Yikes. No, thank you.
Carnitas,
Marcy,
come on.
Yeah, you are a horrible person and I hope you burn in hell. Marcy goes all in. My client is doing the city a favor by gentrifying that place and driving current residents out, and tells Foggy to tell his client to take the deal or live in squalor. Also, who uses that? Live in squalor. I hate her. And then Foggy busts out some pretty badass lawyer speak, capped off with this.
So you're gonna see us in court, where I will absolutely dismantle you from the top of your salon blowout to the bottom of your overpriced pumps.
Sure. Go up, Foggy. We cut to Wesley and Fisk in their black SUV, and Fisk is clearly worried as he rubs his notorious cufflinks. Wesley tells Fisk that they are taking statements from both cops who framed Peter during the interrogation. This leaves an even more lengthy list of crimes behind them, something they've been trying to avoid, as Wesley mentioned to Leland in episode 3.
Now clearly Fisk is worried about more people using his name. If you use his name, it's an instant kill, and his goon cops immediately get the job done. But how many people know his name? Even Wesley notes that Vladimir's list of people who know Fisk's name is getting short, mainly because they keep killing them. Because Fisk is an uncultured boy man, Wesley recommends the 75 Brunello de Montalcino, a wine that ranges from $60 to $400. If you remember the last time Vanessa and Fisk went on a date, Fisk admitted that he didn't know what to order and his assistant recommended a pairing, so we can assume that this is their second date for Fisk and Vanessa. Then we cut to Miss Cardena's apartment, and yes, it's very sketchy, but it is home. The lights flicker, a man's unconscious on the floor, and the paint is peeling off the wall. The 2 shades of green paint don't help. It all looks like the corroding we saw in young Matt's eyes the very first episode when his sight was fading away. Karen and Foggy make their way to Miss Cardena's apartment, and the damage done to this poor woman's apartment is horrible. There's no power, so the only lights illuminating the room are the street lights are outside, a single lantern, and so many candles. A dangerous amount, you might say. If you thought Jesus was gonna sneak by this episode, think again. Miss Cardenas has a beautifully framed photo of Jesus and a rosary that luckily wasn't damaged by these renovations.
Buttholes. Foggy and Karen agree to help Miss Cardenas fix what they can, and even refer back to the electrician they got off in the first episode. We always see the vigilante side of heroism in Daredevil, but what I like about this series, especially this episode, is we also see the street level, non-powered, normal civilian heroism in Karen, Foggy, and Claire. Throughout the MCU, we get a ton of sidekicks that do what they can to support the hero, whether it's Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, or even Iron Man. But in the Netflix series, the best friends or partners are doing the best that they can for the city without or with very minimal direct help from that superhero. Claire wants to help the city, so she became a doctor. Karen is trying to take down her past employer through justice, and Foggy is learning to help those in need, no questions asked. Something we sort of got from Cassie in Quantumania with her activism. I just like seeing these non-powered individuals also thrive as a reflection to what we can do as people in our normal society.
That's right. Like when Superman became a farmer.
Oh, what? No.
So we're back at the precinct with Christian Blake, the corrupt cop. His phone rings and immediately Daredevil is in action, flipping over the fence so quietly Blake had no idea what happened, then promptly punching him in the face. Blake pulls out the gun just to have his forearm immediately twisted behind him and shoved against the wall. Then we get the good old Daredevil interrogation. Back and forth, Blake denies the truth about the interrogation until Daredevil almost breaks his arm. When Daredevil accuses Blake of killing the Russian in interrogation for using Fisk's name, Blake claps back at Daredevil saying, "So what? I heard you like to kill Russians too. You chopped off Anatoly's head." Daredevil pauses before going along with the fake narrative. Smart move, make him scared. He realizes he can get closer to Fisk if people believe he killed Anatoly. Plus, everyone's afraid of a man who can decapitate someone with a car door. So he asks where to find Vladimir next. Unfortunately, Blake doesn't know and is telling the truth once Daredevil hears his heartbeat. Immediately, Blake insults him and Daredevil knocks him out, kicking him directly in the face, and finds his ringing cell phone lying on the ground. Who is this guy? He's worse than Fisk.
Back with Fisk and Vanessa, we're trying this date thing again. A new restaurant and a new dress for Vanessa. I love this one. It's brown. And in the last episode, she made a remark about chocolate being her downfall and wanting to step out of her comfort zone, to which Fisk agrees because she looks great in chocolate-colored dresses. I'm obsessed with this. Fisk learned from the last time and the entire restaurant is empty, so there should be no interruptions this time. This is when they discuss the importance of honesty. Vanessa makes it clear a big part of this relationship has to build on a foundation of trust. And spoilers, no man has trust. No man ever will, Vanessa. Do not trust men. Fisk truly loves this woman though, and begins to open up, starting easy by telling her the wine they'd like tonight. Then this quiet, delicate scene is immediately darkened when we see Vladimir's hand wringing out a washcloth of blood into a steel bucket, and God could never have prepared me to watch Vladimir clean the blood off his decapitated brother's chest. I hated this scene. He's so gentle and it's so sad. He's lightly stroking the blood away from his brother's tattoos. Then Turk enters, apologizing on behalf of the headless brother on the table in front of them.
Turk tells Vladimir an old friend from Rikers had a black, expensive SUV covered in blood and brains delivered to his chop shop on the edge of Hell's Kitchen. Said the man was big, white, and bald. Vladimir knows it must be Wilson Fisk, but Turk also mentions they reference the man with the black mask. So now to Vladimir, it sounds like Wilson and Daredevil are working together. Now he's paranoid Fisk has been playing them and working against them all along. Like Fisk wanted, a war is about to begin with a 1 million hit on his head. Foggy and Karen are fixing Miss Cardena's sink, now flushed with water. Huzzah! Baby steps! In excitement, Miss Cardenas cooks him a meal. She cooks at the downstairs apartment where they have power and makes a homemade Guatemala dish for Karen and Senor Foggy, but also because she's initiating a date between the two. So Karen and Foggy are basically having a little candlelit dinner date. Hopefully in all this love, you didn't forget about Daredevil. Back at his apartment, Claire is going through Blake's old ass Samsung phone, and unfortunately there's nothing on it. The phone is basically empty, no contacts, no numbers, no nothing. It's a burner phone. One text came through from a blocked number with a bunch of locations to allegedly where the Russians are. 47th and 12th. 48th and 9th, 42nd and 10th, 44th and 11th. If you remember back to the first episode where Nobu is going over the blueprints to Hell's Kitchen, we get a glimpse to where the young boy, the Black Sky, would be held, and you can see the numbers on the phone are at least a block away from the area of interest on Nobu's map, so the Russians are perfectly placed around the Black Sky, and when the bombs go off later, it's no surprise Nobu's conquest is safe in the center.
Matt realizes one of the locations is also the truck, a restaurant where they took the boy in episode 2. Matt deduces this is where the Russians are, and before he leaves, we have to talk about the two sides of the same coin that is Wilson Fisk and Daredevil. Vanessa had a heart-to-heart with Fisk about honesty and how important it is. Then we see Daredevil and Claire arguing about transparency and assurance. It's like the lines are getting too foggy and Claire's right. Daredevil's becoming the exact person he swore to fight. He's no longer protecting Hell's Kitchen, he's painting it red. His morality is clouded and judgment completely unclear. Once he realizes how deep he's in, it'll be too late. Like, it's already starting off. He's going downhill. Back on Vanessa and Fisk's date, they have some more small talk over wine. She mentions dating a prince with an ascot, to which Kingpin replies, "Ascot? That's a bit much." I can't do his voice. Actually, I naturally sound like his voice right now. Ascot. That's a bit much. And the writers did this as a shout out to Kingpin's older depictions with an ascot. Clearly, it's a great time until Vanessa mentions sleeping with someone in the past and Fisk is completely uncomfortable at the idea, but he can close a man's neck in a door 22 times and that's nothing to shut her over, so I guess whatever, cool. He makes her smile though when he says he wished he had used that same line on her the first time they met, but she's glad that he didn't. Then we begin the honest conversation and Fisk tells Vanessa about Wesley, even referring to him as a friend, and he'd be so happy to hear that. It was so sweet, and I was like, call him, tell him that he's a friend. Then Vanessa asks what business he's in, to which he says rebuilding the city. She says that sounds like an artist, and I say gentrification.
Yeah. He rubs his cufflinks and admits that they belong to his father, and he wears them every day to remember him. He tells her he passed when he was a boy, but you know how. Now, this is when Fisk notices Vanessa's purse, citing that there's a gun in it. He can tell from the weight distribution. She remarks it's a 22. It's just so interesting because if you go back and rewatch earlier, there is a moment where Wilson Fisk totally clocks her as she walks up, and you can just tell from the muscle tension in her arm that there is a gun in that bag. This man has studied every inch of this woman and knows how she carries herself when there is no weight and when there is weight on it. Creepy, if you ask me. Her chest starts to pick up in speed, and you can't really tell if it's out of irritation or fear. She knows who Fisk is and how he perfectly dances around her questions, to which he replies his lasting goal is to repair the city, which is true in his eyes, no matter who he must kill to make sure the city is cleaned up. And with full honesty, Vanessa tells him that she brought a gun because she knows Fisk is dangerous, but wants a reason to stay, and he got to love this woman.
I love her so much. It's a problem.
I mean, look, Melania gets to have her fans too, right? What? This is Marvel Melania. I'm sorry.
This is. And once you said that, it makes complete sense, and I can't love her anymore. I take it back. I take it completely back.
He continues to tell her he doesn't like the violence he must commit. He doesn't find the pleasure in the cruelty, but the city needs to die before it can be reborn. And if that's not setting up Daredevil Born Again, I don't know what is. They're calling their shots. None of this scares Vanessa, not a single bit. So he gives Fisk her gun, and now he must protect her by his side. And cue the fireworks, I guess?
It's about to happen. It's about to rumble in a minute. Back with Vladimir, Turk got the news where Fisk is, and he's on his way. Little does he know Daredevil sits above them like a gargoyle on the roof, eavesdropping on their conversation. Every time we see him perched on a roof, I'm like, is he a pigeon? Back with Foggy and Karen flirting over dinner, this candlelit dinner is actually very cute. I'll give him that. It's very sweet. Then Karen asks about Matt's love life, to which Foggy says a lot of dumb stuff about Matt knowing which woman to help because they're hot, which rightfully makes Karen uneasy. Foggy doesn't know that weird sexual tension they had in Matt's apartment, so Karen is learning about Matt the wrong way. Then Karen asks Foggy to touch her face so she knows how Matt sees her, and thank God we cut away from this scene because I hate it. Next, there's a blind man walking in the alley. It's one of Madame Gao's men, the people we saw working in the first episode. Daredevil pops out of nowhere and Spartan kicks this goon in the back against the brick wall. They start throwing punches, and again, it's dark, so Daredevil's winning this fight.
And inside the warehouse, men begin grabbing guns and Vladimir is putting on a bulletproof vest. It's the worst timing. Sergei sees Gao's delivery man and asks, "Are we waiting on a delivery from Gao?" And Madame Gao has sent a suicide bomber to blow up the Russian warehouse. They know instantly and dive through the open door to get away. The explosion blasts the steel door off its hinges, hitting Daredevil, who perfectly holds the man he's fighting in the way of the impact, but it still knocks him out unconscious on the ground. Back with this awkward face touching, another explosion ruptures through Hell's Kitchen, shattering Miss Cardena's glass from the window. It explodes, cutting Miss Cardena's face and knocking Foggy and Karen directly off their chairs. Clearly the locations sent to the cell phone are the locations of the explosions, but also the Russian warehouses. All the dates tonight are ruined. Vanessa watches the flames engulf the city, and Fisk uses the boy being kidnapped in the earlier episodes as an excuse for the explosions, which could be true. He's ultimately doing this for a better future in his own sadistic way, and that future may or may not include Vladimir and his men.
Thank God Daredevil also rises from the ashes like a phoenix and hears Sergei asking for Vladimir, and he's back in action. A steel door, that doesn't stop him. And Turk, again, not surprisingly, is on Fisk's side, sitting in a car with Wesley, telling him everything he knew. And it feels like we close every single episode with a reveal, and it's Wesley in a car trapping or talking to someone, using them or doing something. Honestly, great character to play. You get a lot of screen time. Wesley admits it takes time to keep Vladimir off balance. They had Turk tell him the man in the black mask was brought up in Fisk's conversation. They were always 10 steps ahead. They had this planned out from the jump. Back with Sergei and Vladimir, exactly what Claire was afraid of begins to happen. Daredevil is caught by the police beating the crap out of Vladimir, and this man's already down. There's no need to beat him up anymore. He is literally crawling. The anger is clearly coming over him, and it gets the best of him. And this is how we close the episode.
That's where we leave it. Daredevil Season 1, Episode 6, Condemned, a title which refers both to the state of the building Matt is holed up in this episode and the fact that, in the eyes of the people of Hell's Kitchen, he's now guilty of various criminal activities.
Let's get into it. We open right where we left off after the last episode, with Matt surrounded by cops and Vladimir lying on the pavement after his beatdown. When Matt realizes all of these cops work for Fisk, he takes them out and carries an unconscious Vlad to a nearby abandoned building. Meanwhile, Erik is putting together an evidence board in the office using playing cards as stand-ins for the main crime players in Hell's Kitchen. Vladimir and Anatoly are represented by Jax, while Fisk is represented by the King of Diamonds. This is an obvious nod to his Kingpin moniker, but could also be a nod to the diamond-tipped cane he uses in the comics. Erik realizes that the locations of the bombings were all places that were controlled by the Russians, and he takes off.
And then we get a breaking news report regarding the explosions all over Hell's Kitchen, and the news station is New York 1, the same news channel featured in Avengers, Iron Man 3, Spider-Man movies, and even WandaVision Episode 4. The funny thing is, New York 1 is a 24-hour news network dedicated to New York City, and the real-life anchor is Annika Pergament, the same woman we're seeing right here. Pat Kiernan shows up as a news anchor as well. He also appeared in Hawkeye, Far From Home, and No Way Home, another real-life news anchor from New York 1. Foggy and Karen bring Miss Cardenas to Metro General, where Claire looks after her head wound, and it's just really telling that in the middle of all the chaos, this community comes together to help its own, despite the fact that Fisk doesn't consider them the right kind of people. Matt calls Claire for help and patching up Vlad, and look, breaking down every fandom has created a monster in us, so of course I noticed Vladimir's rich man belt. Those Badishi belts average at $300. Should have been using that belt like a tourniquet, and now you're dying.
Yeah, I was looking at his belt and I was like, I can't believe the prop master would buy this belt. He's doing it for himself. And I would too. Either way, back into it. Claire asks Matt what materials he has to work with, and this is what he says right here.
Half a box of nails, broken glass, wood, duct tape, old roadside emergency kit, a lot of plastic sheeting.
Dude doesn't even move around or feel anything, but I guess he could like smell glass and hear nails or something. I don't know how it works, but it's just cool. Matt cauterizes Vlad's wound using a road flare, which is gnarly, and Vlad screams so loud. Cauterizing a wound with a flare gun is truly an insane process. Not only does it allow for more debris to go into the wound, but the bullet is left inside of him. So Vlad would most likely have died from his injuries anyway, and his screams bring a rookie cop to the scene. The guy hadn't been on the job that long, so he isn't even in Fisk's pocket yet, but he yells his location into the walkie-talkie, which brings every cop crooked and otherwise, into this building.
Blake and Hoffman are among the cops on the scene, and much to their chagrin, Erik shows up, which puts a wrinkle in their plan to take out anyone in the building. This is why we need reporters, folks. This is why Blake refers to himself as part of the HNT, which is the hostage negotiation team. So Fisk pivots and sends all his media contacts to the location, including WHIH, the in-universe MCU news station that we saw in Iron Man and other films, the one Christine Everhart is an anchor for. To me, this is the biggest smoking gun connection to the MCU, folks, because that WHIH doesn't just roll up anywhere. It's only when like, oh, this is Kevin Feige's MCU? Okay, that's our jurisdiction. So Matt is trying to pump Vlad for any information about this that might help take him down, but Vlad is being less than cooperative.
You think you're different from me? From him? But you'll get there. Sooner or later. We all do. Men like us.
As Vlad says this, Matt's mouth twitches. Turning into the men he's fighting is what he's afraid of, and what Claire was warning him about last episode.
Yes, while Daredevil interrogates Vladimir admits he joined Fisk's operation to get that sweet, sweet heroin, and the benefit of the cops looking the other way during their criminal activities. I'd like to remind everyone what Daredevil said in She-Hulk episode 8.
Goons and henchmen are two completely different animals. The henchmen believe in the cause, whereas goons are just there for the paycheck.
Vladimir is 100% a goon. Goons never make it out alive, and he is not making it out alive by the end of this episode. Vladimir asks Daredevil if he knows Leslie Shumway. When he admits that he doesn't, Vlad then critiques the American education system, which, yes, it can be shoddy at times, but Capone's accountant was actually Louis Shumway, so who's the dumb one now? I just need these small victories because we're losing in this show right now. Once Daredevil wakes up from being knocked out, Vlad is out cold on the ground. This man has a bullet in his abdomen, a broken arm, and now ceiling dust in and around his mouth. Daredevil listens to his heartbeat, and it's not the normal heartbeat check we normally get, whether people are telling the truth or lying. These heartbeats are super slow. He's making sure the man's not dead yet, and he is. That is until Daredevil basically breaks his ribcage, bringing him back with chest compressions. This is the first episode Fisk and Matt speak or interact at all. You can tell when Daredevil says, "Speak your name," and Fisk goes, "You first." They are just like twin children. I can barely make out what this says on the sniper's bag, but it's clearly an ace of spades, which could be a shout out to Bullseye, who we know appears in the 3rd season. One of Bullseye's signature weapons is the ace of spades. I don't necessarily think this is Bullseye sniping, but it could be a nod to the villain we meet later, though this man's shots are also very much on point. Also, what an homage to Bullseye, the man who frames Daredevil in season 3, and this entire episode is about framing Daredevil all over again. Finally, Daredevil admits defeat to Claire, saying she was right about the discussion in an earlier episode regarding being the hero or the villain in Hell's Kitchen. He finally comes to terms with the fact that he might have been going about it all a little too recklessly.
And the song Vladimir hums as he prepares for his last stand against Fisk's men is "We will be raised from the ashes." The tanks were rumbling in the field. This is right after Daredevil does this sick ass kick to unlock the door. Was it necessary? No, but we close the episode to the array of gunfire between Vladimir and Fisk's men, and now Daredevil is back on the prowl.
Yes. This episode was very slow because it's a lot of a negotiating. There's not that many Easter eggs because it's a lot of long talks on walkie-talkies.
But you know what? I love doing that. That's often how it feels like just co-hosting stuff with you, Jess, is just long, wonderful talks on walkie-talkies. And now we're back together to pick up where we left off on the road with a breakdown of season 1, episode 7, Stick. This episode starts with the camera following a man running down a stairwell in an unbroken take. At first, the camera keeps pace, but by the end, it's a bit ahead of his movement to show that this man is tiring and slowing down. He runs through a glass door with a Japanese symbol on it that translates to Asano Robotics, a division of Roxxon, and it is the company for the comics owned by Iron Man villain Yoshida Asano. Very fun Marvel Easter egg there. This guy fires through the elevator doors, but it is empty.
His pursuer is not the Devil of Hell's Kitchen, but Stick, played by Scott Glenn, asking this. They use it to describe the black sky, which conceals that thing is a boy.
The newspaper headline gives Matt the new moniker, the Devil of Hell's Kitchen. It's accompanied by a photo of him from the surveillance video back in episode 6. Foggy says that he wants to punch the devil in the face, and Matt winces, not because he's afraid of Eldon Henson's fist, but at the thought that his best friend thinks this about him.
The show loves Chekhov's weapons, and here we see Karen's keychain as a pepper spray and Foggy's baseball and baseball bat that they'll use against the nameless goons later outside Miss Cardina's apartment.
Leland and Nobu talk business. Leland says Nobu is clearing the docks and bribing comptrollers, so he knows he's up to something. Leland says that they should look out for each other so that they don't end up like the Russians, but Nobu declines.
Each man must stand for himself or fall with the unworthy.
The hell does that mean?
Leland's superpower is his ability to read the numbers, as he put it, and that's what protects him even when he's being snarky with them.
Matt waits for Nobu to leave and then approaches Leland, who promptly shits his pants.
Oh, God. What do you want? My wallet?
You know what I want.
He doesn't sell out Fisk though. Matt gets distracted by Stick and Leland tases Matt and flees. Stick could obviously hear what Matt was asking Leland and chose this moment to walk out, so he wanted to distract him.
We flash back to young Matt, overwhelmed by his heightened senses. He's in St. Agnes Orphanage now after his father's death. Before, his father was there at his bedside to calm his heightened senses. Now there is no one to give him any relief.
Like adult Matt does, Stick uses a white walking cane for show around others. The nun mentions that Matt's father left him an inheritance that was from his bet he made on himself for his last fight, and we heard him on the phone setting up that trust before his death. Stick asks about Matt's mother, but the nun cuts herself off before getting into it, saying that's another story.
Yeah, and we'll see in the future of the series how Matt's mother actually became a nun, so this nun might even know that nun, right? Stick says this.
Make the check out to cash. Take it from here.
Notice that right after he says he'll take it from here, he drops the charade of needing the cane and just walks right in and closes the door. He's meeting Matt as his authentic self, just like how Matt presented that kid with his authentic face when he raised his mask upon that rescue.
He tosses him a set of keys, which Matt easily catches in midair. Keys, breaks through windows. This guy will catch anything you throw at him.
That's right.
Except for feelings. Actually, no, he does a lot. He does catch feelings a lot.
Stick takes Matt for ice cream in the park, saying that his heightened senses are special gifts.
What's it gonna be, Maddie? You gonna spend your life crying and rocking yourself to sleep at night? Or are you gonna dig deep and find out what it takes to reshuffle those cards life dealt you?
Matt fiddles with a wrapping on his ice cream cone. He will use that wrapping to make a bracelet for Stick, since this moment is when a new father figure came into his life, and it means a lot to him.
Stick has Matt describe everything going on around them in great detail. He describes an old man.
He's dying.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
This and the way Stick tells Matt that he's not going to help him, he's going to train him, sets Stick up as a morally gray character. He's got an angle and we don't know what it is until later, but he's making sure Matt knows that sometimes you can't help people, even if you want to.
And when young Matt asks Stick what he should call him, it cuts back to the present.
Stick, are you gonna lie there all night or get up off your ass?
Echoing the choice he gave Matt all those years ago. Matt says he's been gone 20 years, and Stick says that he's there to save everyone in Hell's Kitchen.
Kieran and Ben meet up to talk about Union Allied. Ben says this.
My experience, there are no heroes, no villains, just people with different agendas.
And this is certainly true of the MCU, since each hero has something they want to achieve and is usually never purely altruistic.
Ben says he doesn't want to be responsible for anything happening to Karen, which is ironic since her roping him into this is what leads to his death.
Spoilers. Stick declares Matt's apartment to be a shithole, and then glaringly bright yellow light coming through is the only light here. Since neither man needs to turn on the lights, Stick can also tell that Matt has silk sheets without going anywhere near his bedroom, and clearly thinks Matt has gone soft.
Stick insults Matt's father and a fight breaks out, leading to another flashback where Stick is beating young Matt, who confesses that he feels guilty for his father's death, but Stick says that he can never know if his dad won that match for Matt or for himself.
Stick refers to the Black Sky as it to convince Matt to come with him to the docks. The Black Sky is part of a hand prophecy and a vessel for the god they worship, which will have immense power and make the hand capable of anything. It is based on the Beast from the comics, a powerful demon that was the source of the hand's power.
Karen checks on Mrs. Cardenas, who had to get 12 stitches in her perfect head. Outside the apartment, Mrs. C's attackers jump Karen. Foggy comes to the rescue with his trusty baseball and bat. Karen empties the pepper spray into tattooed Goon's face, just like he had threatened to do to her. Foggy smacks bald Goon in the head with the bat, and honestly, that dude might be dead. Foggy does not check.
That's fine. At the docks, a shipping container with the same Asana robotic symbol on the side is delivered. Matt identifies 12 heartbeats and one that's different and stronger, which Stick quickly says is Nobu, but it is actually the heartbeat of the Black Sky. When the container is opened later, Matt hears it more clearly.
Stick wants Matt out of the way so that he can kill the Black Sky, so he sends Matt after the others. Matt fights while Stick assembles the bow and arrow, but Matt stops when the container doors open and he realizes they're seemingly not after an it, but a he, a very young he. Stick lets the arrow fly, but Matt kicks it out of the way before it can hit the Black Sky, and Nobu stuffs the kid into a car and takes off.
Damn, Stick. In another flashback, Stick tells young Matt that he needs to control his feelings by meditating, which Matt describes as that thing where you pretend not to sleep. Stick says if he learns to meditate, he can heal wounds faster, which explains how Matt takes a licking but keeps on ticking. Young Matt picks the worst time to give Stick the friendship bracelet he made from their first ice cream outing, and Stick crushes it in his hand right in front of his little blind fatherless face and tells him, "Your training is over. I can't help you anymore."
And back in the present, the men fight.
I needed a soldier. You wanted a father.
Well, I guess we're both disappointed then.
Matt takes the parental rebuke of "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed," and just turns his back on Stick. And Stick says that he killed the Black Sky, leading to this awesome fight in the very awesome moody lighting. Stick smashes Matt through the coffee table, and Matt gets back up with that same move he did on Stick in their last training session, but adding his own chest kick at the end.
Matt tells Stick, "Get out of my city." This is what Stick's been waiting for. Maybe there's hope for you yet. He leaves, but tells Matt he can keep the sticks.
And the sticks? The sticks?
You can take the sticks, and you can leave the sticks.
Are we talking a stick or are we talking a stick? Karen and Ben fill Foggy in on their investigation. Ben adds another playing card to the board, the Jack of Hearts, with the black mask representing the Devil of Hell's Kitchen, and he puts his card next to the King of Diamonds at the top, which you know would piss Fisk off.
Yeah,
he wanted to be above.
Matt cleans up and finds the bracelet he gave Stick. The reason Stick cut him out years ago is because he had to break the heart of the kid he cared about.
And we transition from the wind blowing to a meditation bowl with some smoking incense. Stick tells a man that the Black Sky is no longer a threat.
For now, what about Murdock?
Stubborn, immature, still a real pain in the ass.
The man asks if Matt will be ready when the doors open, and Stick says he has no idea. So this dude is Stone, a member of the Chaste, which is an anti-hand organization that Stick is a part of. And the door that he's talking about is a door to Kunlun, the mystical city and gateway to another dimension guarded by Iron Fist.
This was laying the groundwork for a bunch of stuff to go down the line in the Defenders' Iron Fist, but this part of the story was kind of cut short, so it'll be interesting to see if Born Again makes any mention of any of this.
Yeah, are we going back to the Stone Zone? Speak up, Stone Zoners. Do you need Stone in your show? Because Stone never really went anywhere.
Stone is gone.
On to episode 8, Shadows in the Glass. This episode opens with Fisk waking up from a nightmare and getting ready for his day. And this opening sequence is one of the coolest of the series. He calms himself by looking at Rabbit in a Snowstorm, and Bach's prelude from Unaccompanied Cello Suite No. 1 in G major plays. He prepares his breakfast and then eats alone. He selects his suit and shirt for the day. Then he opens his drawer filled with cufflinks and selects the same ones as he always does. He completes his daily ritual by turning around, and we get a jump scare as he sees himself in the mirror, not as he is now, but as a child covered in blood, his father's blood. No matter how much he's come up, he still sees himself as that blood-covered little boy. Oh, if only he knew Echo, he could be cured of this trauma.
The damage from Matt's fight with Stick is on full display in this place. Matt didn't even bother to wash the blood off his own head before going to bed. This show loves comparing Matt and Fisk, and despite very different morning routines, they're both haunted by the scenes of their past and father figures who let them down.
And we should note, speaking of Echo, technically he does know Maya Lopez at this point. All those scenes took place in the late aughts, so like he knew young Maya Lopez from a young age. So every version of Wilson Fisk we see in the show is someone who knew Tracksuit Mafia, Willie Lopez, and Maya Lopez. Somewhere out there he's like, oh, Maya is out there. I need to make sure I protect Maya. I hope she doesn't shoot me in the eye. All these stories are connected now, folks.
Oh, that was a good impression.
Yeah, it's fine. After Stick's visit, Matt freaked out about putting Karen and Foggy in harm's way with his vigilantism, so he decides to help them with the Union Allied case through the legal system instead.
Nobu tells Fisk,
it will be difficult to locate another Black Sky. They are extremely rare.
In season 2, it's revealed that Elektra is also a Black Sky.
We'll get to that next week.
Nobu's pissed about how everything went down, and Fisk apologizes. After Nobu leaves, Fisk tells Wesley that Nobu and his men are a necessary evil, and says it's more important to be cautious when everything seems more like it's going your way. Brown Sugar by the Rolling Stones sparks a Fisk-centric flashback, and it doesn't state the year necessarily, but the song came out in April of 1971.
Wilson's dad, Bill, played by The Wire's Dominic Lombardozzi, is running for 3rd Council District and puts together campaign signs with the help of his wife, Marlene, and son, who's clearly afraid of him and desperate to please. And we, again, get some Chekhov's weapon because this hammer is exactly what'll be used later.
Marlene sorts through a stack of past due bills and writes checks they can't afford. Bill says he took out a loan from Rigoletto. In episode 1, Wesley told Farnham that Fisk inherited these books from Rigoletto after the old Don retired. But Silvio told Erik that Rigoletto retired in pieces. In the comics, Fisk was Rigoletto's bodyguard and murdered him before his own rise to power.
And we go back to the present on Bill's hammer swing. Again, the same hammer he'll be bludgeoned with later. Wesley calls to say Detective Blake is awake after getting shot by Fisk's sniper back in episode 6. He's got a 24-hour police detail on him, so Fisk talks to his partner, Hoffman, because he wants Blake eliminated. Hoffman's uneasy at first.
So how long before I do something that pisses you off?
Well, the answer to that is entirely up to you.
What a terrifying response. Hoffman almost breaks down in tears.
Hoffman says Blake isn't just his partner, he's a friend of 35 years.
How much are each of those years worth to you? In round figures.
It cuts to the hospital and the camera glides down the hallway in slow-mo as the nurses and doctors go about their day. The elevator doors open on a resigned-looking Hoffman. Netflix's MCU shows always use elevators in interesting ways. Like every few episodes, there's just an awesome elevator moment. It's an inexpensive but effective way to convey tension, awkwardness, or badassery.
And the camera backs up through the same hallway, leading Hoffman blind to everyone around him until he comes to Brett Mahoney guarding Blake's room. So Mahoney's one of a few cops on the force who isn't in Fisk's pocket, so he plays this by the book, making Hoffman sign in and checking his bag, which contains a meatball sub from Marchione's. Hidden in that sub is a poison-filled syringe. Hoffman apologizes to Blake and injects it into his IV. Blake wakes up and Hoffman is shook even before Matt comes up behind him and chokes him.
Matt can't help Blake because the poison has reached his heart, but he wants info on Fisk. Blake mumbles, "Is it my turn for this?" He knew that once he got in bed with Fisk, it was only a matter of time. Just like Hoffman said earlier, Matt listens to Blake's final words. With one last gasp, Blake dies, and the officers burst into the room, but Matt's already gone, and another body is pinned on him.
Leland gets fitted by Melvin Potter, the suit maker Fisk mentioned in episode 4 when Anatoly slashed at him with a knife. He's played by Avatar's Matt Gerald.
Potter's workshop has a bunch of Easter eggs in it. On the walls, a poster that reads La Vengeance de la Gladiatores, or Revenge of the Gladiators. Gladiator is Potter's comic alter ego, and the poster itself looks like an altered version of Daredevil issue number 226. There's also some circular saw blades, Gladiator's weapons of choice. In the comics, he was an enemy turned ally of Daredevil. The suit Leland is being fitted for is green and a nod to the comic look as the owl. There's a metal stilt legs in the back, so Potter may be building a suit for Stiltman, aka Wilbur Day, a scientist who sometimes fights Daredevil.
And actually, writers on She-Hulk said that they considered Stiltman for an appearance on that show. So again, it is all connected. It's always been connected. It's one world.
Missed opportunity.
Oh, for sure. Stiltman, are you kidding me? Leland mentions telling his son Lee to stay out of New York. There's some theories online that Lee could go on to become the actual owl.
In another flashback, Marlene gives an upset Wilson some Zuppa, the dessert he ordered on his date with Vanessa. They share it and there's bruises from Bill on Marlene's arms. Wilson tells his dad that Bernie Walker knocked his campaign signs down and called his father and son a loser. And Bill lost his run for city council. So Bill goes and Bernie up and tells Wilson to kick his ass.
It's this moment with Bill egging Wilson on to keep kicking Bernie, to prove that he's a man that unlocks the ability for Wilson to do this to his father later on. Wilson wakes up from another nightmare, looks at Rabbit in a Snowstorm to calm himself. Bach's prelude kicks up again and he repeats his morning ritual all over again, which means he has nightmares like this every night. This is a man who craves order because of the tumultuousness of his childhood, and he's trying to apply that order to what he sees as a chaotic city. And I just love all the shooting of these sequences because they do some practical camera work with like the mirror. They have to like replace the mirror when the young version of Fisk shows up. Like that's all in one shot. So when it twists around, they clearly remove the mirror and had the kid step in as a reflection. I just love anytime they do crazy stuff with mirrors. Like James Cameron loves doing that.
Yeah.
He loves doing crazy mirror stuff.
His morning routine is interrupted by a call from Wesley saying Gal's on her way there to his safe, sanitized sanctuary. It causes a burst of vulnerability.
Can you be here before she arrives?
Gal scares Wilson, and so he asks the one person he trusts in the world to come be with him. This lays the groundwork for how unmoored he'll be by Wesley's death. Wesley says he's already on his way because this dude knows what his BFF needs before he even asks.
Gal reveals she speaks English, a great long con revealed at just the right moment. When asked how many languages she speaks, she responds, all of them. Gao is over 400 years old due to her connection to the hand and to Kunlun, so that's like 400 years of Duolingo right there.
Gao is probably the most badass villain. I'm sorry, she's so cool. She also reveals that she knows Fisk speaks Mandarin, so he too was playing a long con, like he does in life, although less successfully. She also knows he speaks Japanese, and I bet he knows Russian since that's all the other languages that the head speak.
Yeah, especially if the Tracksuit Mafia is currently one of his like divisions. A lot of them speak Russian. Gao dismisses Wesley, Fisk's comfort safety net, and speaks directly to him in Mandarin, giving her the advantage. Nobu and Leland aren't happy with him. If he doesn't return his house to order, she'll cut him out and deal with those two directly. Then she politely thanks him for the tea and leaves, and Fisk freaks out and flips the table. And damn, I love it! Wesley checks in on him and Fisk yells at him to get out, and his house has never been less in order.
It flashes back to Bill making Wilson sit and stare at their white wall and think about the kind of man he wants to be.
You're my son. You should be a king, not some fat little pussy.
Bill struggles with the same cufflinks Wilson wears now, and Marlene worries about how much Bill owes Recoletto, and he gives her a hell of a slap, and the camera stays on Wilson staring at the white wall.
The sounds of Marlene's beating bleed over back into the present as adult Wilson stares out his window, looking at the shadows of his childhood in the glass. Wesley comes in and Fisk lashes out at him, but Wesley knows him.
If I needed you, I would have asked.
I don't think that's always true, sir.
And just like a white wall calms this dude down, Vanessa in a white dress has the same effect.
Vanessa asks the man baby to tell her his story, and he flashes back to the beating. The camera starts on the white wall and then circles around as his dad screams. Everything in the background is out of focus, but then Wilson makes the decision and it becomes clear. He picks up the hammer and screams at his dad to stop it. His dad taunts him again, thinking there's no way Wilson would have the guts to actually do anything, and whoo boy, is he wrong.
Bill turns back around and Wilson takes a good swing at the back of Daddy's head, and the metallic bone sound it makes coupled with one splash of blood is gruesome. Right before he swings, there's a sound in the music like a heartbeat speeding up, and then a hammer clang rings for a bit.
You believe this kid? He gets that shit from you.
Bill, shocked, feels the back of his head before collapsing, and Wilson repeats the words his father said to him earlier with Bernie.
Keep kicking him! Keep kicking him! Wilson focuses on the white wall as his mom hugs him and tells him it'll be okay. His father's fingers twitch. And mom tells Wilson, get the saw.
And that might be even more gruesome than what came before. Oh man.
Yeah, get the saw. Then she rolls the body onto some duct tape together trash bags, and this plays out in reverse of the adult Fisk's daily routine. She undoes the buttons on his shirt and takes off the cufflinks and hands them to her son. Then she goes to work with that saw, and I love that we see and hear just how difficult sawing this body actually is.
In the present, Fisk fingers the cufflinks. He says they dumped his dad's body in the river and everyone assumed Bill left town because of the money he owed Rigoletto. Wilson went to live with relatives on the farm, which he mentioned to Vanessa on their date. He wears the cufflinks as a reminder that he's not cruel for the sake of cruelty and he's not a monster.
To whom, Fisk? You're a monster to me. Fisk says people are trying to ruin him, and cold as ice, Vanessa asks if he's going to let them. He responds, no. And a flash of lightning illuminates the new villain power couple and a gorgeous shot of them, the city in the front of them.
And outside of that city, Erik walks through the rain. Daredevil appears behind him out of nowhere, and the two can have a soggy conversation. Daredevil gives Erik Fisk's name, but the only info he has is what he's beaten out of people, which a methodical reporter like Erik can't really use.
You get this on tape? Somebody else in the room? Corroborate what he said? I need reliable sources.
Gao schooled Fisk earlier, now Erik does the same to Matt. He and Fisk are both kids playing dress up with a childlike dream of saving their city, but no real practical idea of what that actually means.
Matt says he bet his life on the fact that Fisk is the man at the top, and Ben says, you're betting mine now too, and someone save this man, please! Please don't let him go! Ben asks for everything Daredevil knows, and it's punctuated by a loud thunderclap, like Fisk and Vanessa's team up was punctuated by a lightning strike.
Wilson wakes up from a nightmare and looks at Rabbit in a snowstorm, but his routine has been altered. He looks at Vanessa next to him. She joins him at breakfast. She picks out a suit, a different one than before, gray instead of black. He opens his cufflink drawer and she picks out a new pair. And for the first time since he was a kid, he doesn't see himself as the boy covered in blood.
This is all set to VO from Ben writing his article exposing Fisk, but Fisk goes on TV and pledges philanthropic aid for the city and denounces the devil of Hell's Kitchen and others like him. The headline reads, Wilson Fisk pledges aid to Hell's Kitchen, speaks out against violence and corruption. The news ticker at the bottom says some community members question motives. Fisk political ties unknown at this time. Previously unknown philanthropist identified as Wilson Fisk. Mayor applauds citizens who give back to the community. NYPD reaffirms effort to stem violent crime.
Erik deletes his article. After threatening anyone who would dare speak his name, Fisk breaks up his routine and proclaims it on national television. Now it's Matt who has a freak out, shoving his laptop off the table. And I think of all the episodes in season 1, this is my favorite. It's such a cool episode.
I love and hate the Wilson Fisk dad murder episode, but damn, the shooting of it.
It's awesome.
That cinematographer said, let me direct, write, let me do it all. Episode 9, Speak of the Devil, opens with a direct face punch. Matt and Nobu fight it out. Nobu wears a red ninja outfit, the kind of members from the Hand wear in the comics. And Nobu is clearly a better fighter here, and Matt's trying every trick he can muster.
Matt is thrown into a metal barrel and the ringing noise lingers. Nobu uses this moment to bust out his Kyuketsu Shoge, the hooked blade attached to a chain, and reels Matt in like a fish.
After the opening credits, Matt's outside the church. A day or so before the fight, he and Father Lantom discuss the devil and whether he's real or just a symbol.
Karen, Foggy, and Ben regroup after Fisk took control of his own narrative, spinning himself as a poor kid from Hell's Kitchen who made good after his dad abandoned him at 12 and his mother died, later revealed as another lie.
Matt's introduced to Ben, who launches into a story of how he was visited by the man in the mask. Matt sidles away guilty. Ben says the man said he was framed, and Foggy responds like this.
I could say I'm Captain America, but it doesn't put wings on my head.
We learn that Detective Hoffman's missing, and Fisk isn't responsible for it because he's also desperate to find him.
Wesley says polls show Fisk's approval rating rising. They've got construction plans for 52nd and 9th for a mixed use of residential/hotel/retail 4-tower complex. Wesley says Senator Cherry wants a meeting. He shows up in the next episode and was a corrupt politician from the comics.
A pissed Nobu demands the city block Fisk promised him, and Fisk says he'll put the screws to the tenants in Miss Cardena's building and give that block to Nobu.
Miss Cardenas tells Karen, Matt, and Foggy that Fisk doubled the offer to get everyone to move. Karen and Foggy tell her to convince the neighbors to turn it down, but Matt is worried Fisk will do something terrible if he doesn't get his way.
Matt goes to Vanessa's gallery. He clocked the armed guards guarding her. He gives her his best boy smile, and she describes a painting to him that looks like the world on fire. It contrasts with the stark white rabbit in a snowstorm.
Matt's attempt to get Vanessa to talk about Fisk leads to the men meeting face to face for the first time, and Matt can't help but clench his fist. They size each other up. Fisk senses something's off about Matt and watches him go with a look.
It cuts to the church, and Jesus on the cross bathed in yellow light. Lantom's worried Matt did something foolish, and Matt responds like this.
I haven't done anything. Not yet.
Echoing what he said in episode 1, that he wasn't seeking penance for what he's done, but forgiveness for what he's about to do.
Vanessa left Matt shaken. She loves and would mourn Fisk. Some might take this as a weakness to exploit. Matt takes it as evidence of Fisk's humanity. Lantom says this is why judgment and vengeance are best left to God.
Karen IDs the goons that grabbed her outside Miss Cardenas as Stuart Schmidt and Joseph Pike. They're both minor characters from the comics. Pike went by the alias Wall-Eyed, and Schmidt's nickname was Stymie. They're also AWOL, so that's another investigative dead end.
Foggy unveils their law firm's new, cool, and official sign, but their happy moment is interrupted by news of Mrs. C's death. Oh no. The cover story is she was stabbed by a junkie. They'll all feel guilty about this for a while. Matt swings back to being pro-killing Fisk, and he grips his cane tight, and it flashes forward to the fight with Nobu.
Also, Miss Cardena's death is, we're allowed to be sad. She was with us with so many episodes, and then it's just, all of a sudden she gets killed, and we were trying so hard to make sure this didn't happen, and then here it comes, and no one knows the truth. No one knows justice? I'm fine. I'm back to normal. Nobu gets a few more slices in and accidentally pierces a barrel of flammable liquid in the process. The gushing clear liquid is reminiscent of the liquid that blinded Matt, except here it's what's going to save him.
Nobu wraps a chain and hook around Matt, and then he just brutally drags him over the floor. Matt screams transition to the wail of a police siren.
Karen, Matt, and Foggy drown their sorrows at Josie's. On the TV, the headline reads, "Tenement death sparks outrage. Philanthropist releases statement." And Wilson Fisk says, "We can make a difference." Fisk says he mourns her death before pivoting into more talking points about retaking the city.
Karen says she prays the man in the mask gets his hands on Fisk and knocks his head off. Later, she'll feel an attraction to and a sympathy for Frank Castle when he goes on a vigilante tear. So this is another hint that Karen is a bit morally gray herself.
Matt goes home and makes his mind to put on the mask again. He keeps the costume in a chest underneath some of his dad's things, including his Red Battalion Jack Murdock boxing robe, a photo of Matt with his dad at Fogwell's gym, and the Braille alphabet card that Matt used to learn. And it's got a splash of blood on it, probably from one of the times he had to sew up his dad's face after a match.
There's a montage of Matt beating down every street-level thug he can find. One guy drops a heroin packet with the logo of Davos, aka the Steel Serpent, an Iron Fist villain. This leads Matt to a heroin den where he finds some drugged-out guys and Mrs. Cardena's purse. He beats the hell out of a terrified guy who sends him to Pier 81 on the water.
At the warehouse, Matt finds the redevelopment plans, which are marked with the name Kruma. Talia Kruma is a character from the comics who was an engineer and sometimes helped the Avengers.
Matt hears Nobu's heartbeat slow at first, but then picking up speed. He has an ability to slow his heart rate down and lower his body temperature, thus concealing him from Matt and his super senses.
The fight starts and Nobu flings knife after knife at Matt, who knocks them away with his sticks. They tussle and Nobu punches Matt in the face, which is where this episode started. But it cuts to Karen and Foggy, the loved ones Matt will be leaving behind if he doesn't make it out of the fight.
And it cuts right back to the fight the moment Nobu drags Matt across the ground with that hook, and Matt leaves a gnarly bloodstain across the floor. He manages to free himself and pull the blade loose, and with the last of his energy, chest kicks Nobu back into the leaking barrel. Matt tricks Nobu into throwing the blade at him and then diverts it up into the lamp, which shatters and sparks and sets Nobu ablaze. But that fiery ninja keeps right on coming.
Nobu succumbs to the flames, but Matt's in for one last surprise. Fisk emerges, thanking him for removing Nobu, who was becoming an issue. And Fisk set the whole thing up and knows Matt's weakness is women and children. Fisk is lit by the flames burning up Nobu.
Matt's hurt, but tells Fisk he's gotta kill him. And Fisk says, "Take your shot." Matt gets a couple punches in, but doesn't stand a chance. Fisk just brute strengths him. Matt slashes at him and notices the body armor he's wearing. Fisk picks him up, looking like King Kong, and then tosses him into the table. Matt tries to get back up, and I love the detail that the city plants stick to the blood from his back wound. It's just another thing trying to convince him to stay down.
Fisk leaves the actual kill shot to Wesley, but Matt throws his stick, causing the gunshot to go wild, and Matt jumps out the window into the harbor. Fisk puts men on the docks to watch out for him, and the hand has the ability to bring some people back from the dead, so Nobu actually returns in season 2.
Drunk Foggy goes to Matt's apartment and finds him in his man in black getup at death's door, and if that doesn't sober him up quick, nothing will.
Episode 10, Nelson vs. Murdock, picks up soon after episode 9 with Matt stitched up but still in bad shape. Foggy's still with him, and during a lucid moment, Matt had him call Claire to fix him up, and Foggy's understandably pissed and is like, "Are you even blind, bro?"
It flashes back to 2009, as evidenced by the Conference Champs 2009 Bolts sticker on Foggy's Dell laptop, and he's in full "dude, you're getting a Dell" mode with his shaggy hair and goatee. The Brooklyn Bolts are a fictional in-universe baseball team, and Foggy has a poster for Harris, a fake player, on his wall.
His new freshman roommate Matt, also with a dumb haircut, introduces himself. Foggy's playing Drops of Jupiter by Train to hammer home the fact that, it's 2009.
And just 2 years after the 2007 flashback with Wilson Fisk that we saw in the Hawkeye series. So, people age differently in this world. If you're Wilson Fisk, you don't really grow up that much. The guys bond over the fact that they're both from Hell's Kitchen, and Foggy says that they're gonna be like Maverick and Goose. And if, our fears about Foggy and Daredevil Born Again come true, is he gonna be on the Goose end of that pairing? Oh no. But then we come back to the present day with still very grumpy Foggy. Matt gave Foggy his world on fire speech to try to explain how he's blind, but not blind, Foggy simmers down long enough to ask Matt if he blew up the buildings and shot those cops, and this is what makes Matt cry.
Karen calls Foggy, who lies for Matt, and then breaks down because now he's a liar and he demanded to know everything.
Fisk and Gao meet at the rooftop garden at Rockefeller Plaza, the same spot Spider-Man and Mary Jane were in that Tobey Maguire Spider-Man scene. Gao knows Fisk set up Nobu to die and says that his clan prepares his body for what is to come, a hint that he's gonna come back. Gao asks the same thing Hoffman asked Fisk.
还有多久，你就要把野心挤上我？
Gao says that if Fisk doesn't choose between the light or the dark, savior or oppressor, others will choose for him. And it cuts to Erik, the guy who's about to find out Fisk's big secret about his mother and force his hand. Erik sits at the hospital beside his wife, Doris. Her room shows the signs of a longtime resident, a photo of the couple, stacks of books, and a colorful quilt. The implication is she's in some stage of dementia.
And Ben says, "I've missed you," and he's not talking physically, he's talking mentally. On this visit, she remembers who she is, and that's what he's missed. She then reminds him who he is, a reporter who used to be reckless, but grew wiser and still has his best work ahead of him. This is gonna be so sad in retrospect.
Yes. The two smooch, but Doris forgets what's happening and she greets Ben all over again. And it gets even sadder from there as Shirley tells Ben that his request for an extension for Doris's care didn't come through.
Back at Matt's, he's finished filling Foggy in, who asks where he got his black crime fighting outfit. Matt responds, "The internet," and Foggy says,
"Bunch of long underwear types. Stitch these together yourselves."
We've seen a bunch of MCU heroes put together their costumes, including Spider-Man and Ms. Marvel. By the end of the season, Matt will get a costume upgrade.
Yes. Foggy once again nails the voice of the audience.
A blind old man taught you the ancient ways of martial arts. Isn't that the plot to Kung Fu?
Matt demonstrates his ability and freaks Foggy out by knowing too many details about him, and Foggy asks if anything was real between them, and it cuts to another flashback.
Foggy gives Matt crap for taking Spanish just for the Greek girl, which is definitely a reference to Electra Nachios, who we'll meet in season 2. Matt says it didn't work out with him. Matt says he's looking for someone he really likes listening to. That fuckboy told both Claire and Karen that he liked listening to the sound of their voices. The friends dream about forming Nelson and Murdock together.
In the present, Ben jump scares Karen in her office. That is true. 90% of the show is Karen getting scared. It's understandable.
I can't talk to you.
Jesus Christ, can't you guys just fucking text me?
Hey, Karen, what do you think of my new hockey mask?
With a knife? Yeah. He's always showing up bloody with a knife. He just got beaten and Karen's like, what's going on? In the present, Ben jump scares Karen in her office, and hasn't this poor woman been through enough? Please stop. We love Karen. We don't want her to have a heart attack. He hands off a Converse box full of his research, determined to take time off for his wife, but Karen sucks him back in. Karen, stop convincing people. You know how I was just for her. Now I'm screaming at her because Karen kind of does these things. Stop convincing people of things. Let him go. She tells him to take a ride with her, and he says, what could it hurt? Damn it, Karen.
I like to think that Ben Urich wears Converses. Like,
yeah, no, he does, right?
Yeah, he does.
That's why he has so many boxes.
He's so cool. He keeps the boxes.
He keeps the boxes.
Foggy finds out from Mahoney that the junkie who killed Elena was thrown off the roof. He asks Matt if he did that. Matt denies it, but says he wanted to kill Fisk. And Foggy asks, what happened to going after the bad guys through the law? Matt responds that sometimes the law isn't enough. By the end of the season, Matt and Foggy reckon with the fact that sometimes it's a combination of both legal channels and vigilante justice that's needed.
You sounded like Marissa Tomei. No, the defense is wrong.
The defense is wrong.
The defense is wrong.
Then it flashes back to them interning at Landman and Zack, the law firm that represents Roxxon Energy, the evil conglomerate also shown in Agent Carter, Iron Man, and a bunch of others if you look close enough. Landman and Zack strong arm a dying man, a former Roxxon employee, and Matt feels super icky about it. He reads the same Thurgood Marshall quote he read to his dad and convinces Foggy that they need to get the hell out of Dodge and go into their practice for themselves.
Back at the present, there's more hints that Karen's got a dark backstory.
There's nothing worse. Feeling choices are made for us. There's nothing you can do but swim in shit and hope you don't get too much in your mouth.
St. Benezet, the care facility where Karen finds Fisk's mother, stands in direct comparison to the crappy conditions Doris lives in. Marlene's also suffering from dementia, but she has her own private room with all the amenities.
Yeah, doesn't she have a fireplace?
Yeah, it looks pretty sweet.
I'm not trying to, it just must be nice. Must be nice.
To not know where you are.
To not know where you are, yeah, what happens? Also, don't leave a fireplace on with a woman. That poor woman might burn herself. They're not thinking ahead of themselves. A confused Marlene sells out her son immediately for killing his dad.
Wilson just wanted him to stop.
She says he was such a good boy, and it cuts to Fisk at a fundraising event, showing him from a low angle and making him look huge, contrasting with his mother's image of him as a sweet little boy.
After he finishes the speech, Leland gives a bitchy, reluctant clap, but Wesley is all in and clapping for his bestie with his whole heart. Senator Cherry pulls Fisk away from Vanessa and Leland to discuss a zoning issue. Leland says the senator managed to win because of the advice he got from Van Lunt and his crackpot astrologer. In the comics, Cornelius Van Lunt was a real estate figure who dressed up like a bull when he went by this villain alias of Taurus. There is also an outline of the name Van Lunt on the Nelson and Murdock door, indicating that he owned this office space before them.
I can't wait to see him come back in Born Again.
Cornelius is in Born Again.
Cornelius!
You got my bull costume wet.
What have you done to this office? It looks horrible. I love this man. I bring him back. There's a million Corneliuses in the MCU now.
Mercury's in retrograde.
I love him. And this is the idea I have for him. It's not gonna look like that at all if he shows up. After drinking the champagne, people start to collapse and foam from the mouth, and we find out in the next episode that Gal and Leland poisoned their champagne, hence why he takes a glass but never actually drinks it.
Foggy asks what made him become a vigilante, and Matt tells the story of hearing a girl down the block crying. Her dad was abusing her. Matt called child services, but it continued, so he paid the man a visit, and we see Matt in a more homemade outfit with a less polished fighting style.
Foggy and Matt yell at each other, and Foggy leaves, and we get one last flashback at Josie's bar when Foggy drew the design for the Nelson and Murdock sign on the cocktail napkin. This is also when the show twists the knife in with this scene. The cocktail napkin cuts to the real sign, which Foggy then tosses in the trash.
Also, I don't know, I just rewatched West Wing, but I got some vibes of Bartlett for America on the cocktail napkin, right?
Glass onion? Didn't they do that in Glass Onion?
Oh yeah, she drew her whole like design of the.
She's like, that's my design.
Yeah. All right, on to episode 11, The Path of the Righteous. This is the episode where Karen straight up murders Wesley. We start in the Metro General ER waiting room.
The kid has some snot seeping down, like they've been crying, so maybe a loved one is in the ER, and they're about to get bumped down the priority list to make room for Fisk's one true love. He carries Vanessa straight in from the fundraiser, surrounded by security. Wesley and Leland, who's playing up the whole, I didn't drink anything, but I was near the poison, am I okay? Angle.
Fisk is furious that he can't go into the ER with Vanessa shouting, don't you know who I am? But that nurse does not care. Fisk calls in a specialist and Vanessa ultimately pulls through, but is put into a medically induced coma.
Karen shows up at Matt's with a get well balloon with a monkey on it. She knows the story that Matt got into a car accident is a big fat lie. She plays along for a bit, saying she hopes the car that hit him was expensive and German. He responds that it was Japanese since Nobu is the one who actually kicked the crap out of him. Karen fills Matt in on Fisk's mother, but he's doubtful that exposing Fisk's lie would have any real impact. Erik later echoes the same sentiment.
Claire patches up Matt again, and I hope he's paying her union wages because she's spending way too much time fixing that dude up. Slicing at Fisk and seeing he was wearing light body armor makes him reconsider Claire's earlier suggestion to get some himself. Claire says she's got to get out of the city and says goodbye to Matt, effectively ending their whatever ship. She's not going that far though, because she will patch up Luke Cage in season 1 of Jessica Jones.
There you go, baby. Claire tells Matt that martyrs end up bloody and alone, and so naturally he goes back to the church to bug Father Lantom. Lantom admits he knows how Matt spends his nights, and they go back to talking about the devil. Lantom says maybe God created the devil as a warning to everyone to tread the path of righteous, and Matt goes home to meditate. When he was younger, Stick taught him to meditate to help him heal faster, but this time he has a flashbacks of Fisk beating on him and he can't get into his groove. So he's like, to hell with this, and hunts down the Turk to find out where Fisk gets his body armor.
He goes to Melvin Potter's workshop and they fight, with Melvin tossing his signature circular saw blades as weapons. They're marked with the logo for Caxton Industries. In the comics, that's where Wilbur Day / Stiltman worked. Caxton shows up again in Jessica Jones as a shell company.
Matt quickly realizes that Melvin isn't quite right when he starts worrying in a childlike voice that Fisk is going to hurt Betsy. In the comics, Betsy Beatty was Potter's therapist turned wife. Matt immediately switches gears and apologizes and offers to help Melvin and ask him for his own special suit.
Wesley comforts Fisk, who's feeling especially vulnerable since he told Vanessa that the safest place was by his side. If she gets better, he wants her sent away. Then Fisk almost tells his bestie how he feels about him.
Thank you.
I love this bromance. Fisk should have told him that he platonically loves him here, because this dude ain't gonna get another chance.
I also think he's actually in love with him. Not Fisk. I think Wesley's like, this is my husband. Wesley finds out that Karen and Ben visited Fisk's mother and borrows one of the bodyguard's keys and a gun. Fisk talks to a comatose Vanessa, saying he doesn't know how to pray and can't pray for her, but he can offer her something better that not even God can prevent.
The people that did this to you, they will suffer.
Fisk doesn't believe in anything bigger than himself and puts faith only in what he can accomplish on his own. This contrasts with Matt, who's often seen praying and wondered in the episode why God put the devil in him.
Karen gets snatched by Wesley. She comes to with a gasp and hears water dripping, her closed eyes heightening her hearing. As she looks around, the sound of dripping becomes softer. This scene is one of the most insane of the first season in terms of character development. From the get-go, it seems that Wesley has all the power, reminding Karen that they spared her and gave her a settlement after the Union Allied fiasco. Karen cries, her breathing ragged, whatever drugs Wesley used to knock her out, leaving her a little out of it. Then Wesley lays a gun on the table.
Karen is a character that could very easily have evolved into shrieking damsel in distress, but the writers cleverly laid clues throughout this season that she has a darker backstory. Wesley keeps talking, allowing Karen to quietly assess the situation and look for an opening. Wesley reveals that he knows Karen visited Fisk's mom, and she lets out a little gasp when he says he knows Ben was there too. When Wesley says Fisk would be upset if he knew, Karen has this amazing reaction. She stops crying and straight face tells him that if he's going to kill her, he should do it because she's sick of his bullshit. She's baiting him, and that gives her the upper hand.
He throws her a curveball by offering her a job, convincing Ben not to write the story and singing Fisk's praises. And at the hospital, Fisk has just noticed his bestie's absence. Ironically, if Karen had just agreed to Wesley's terms, he likely never would have told Fisk about any of this, and it would have just allowed her time to regroup. But Wesley threatens Ben and Matt and Foggy, and then gets a call from Fisk, distracting him just long enough for her to grab the gun.
Wesley bluffs that the gun isn't loaded, and Karen cocks it, clearly knowing how to handle the firearm. Then she delivers this banger of a line.
Do you really think this is the first time I've shot someone?
And then she shoots him 7 times! Pop, 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 pop. I think that was 7 either Either way, she wipes her fingerprints off the table, grabs the gun and her purse as Fisk repeated calls to Wesley go unanswered.
Aren't you kind of reminded of Fisk's mother? Like they both quickly clean up the crime scene and that's where they could just spring into action.
I love her. She's stealthy.
Episode 12, The Ones We Leave Behind, picks up right after, and Karen's murder is gonna have the absolute worst fallout. Karen throws the gun into the harbor and goes home and drinks. She tries to shower away the evidence, but girl, watch a CSI show because that gun's residue is still there. She has a nightmare of Fisk showing up in her apartment. Fisk showing up like this foreshadows how he will later do that to Ben, but it is real then.
Karen says she's thinking of giving up booze and moving on to the hard stuff. In the comics, she actually became a heroin addict, and Foggy says this.
Weed, pot, the Mary Jane, whatever the kids are calling it these days.
I'm not sure that's considered hard anymore. At least not according to Denver anyway.
Colorado and Washington were the first two states to legalize recreational marijuana use in 2012. Now in 2025, 24 states have legalized it.
Foggy says he'll continue digging into Fisk because he can't run around killing people and call yourself a human being, and Karen looks guilty as hell. Matt shows up and knows something's wrong with Karen, both from her attitude and find out later in season 2 because he can smell the gunpowder on her.
Vanessa wakes up from her coma and refuses to be sent away, so Fisk promises her that he'll make the person who did this suffer.
Fisk's joy is short-lived as he finds Wesley's body and takes his rage out on the bodyguard, Francis, in another little boy tantrum. Fisk tells Leland to find out who did this, and he lovingly strokes the side of Wesley's head and gives him a little kiss. He checks Wesley's cell phone and sees the last person he spoke with was Fisk's mother, and it cuts to Erik, who will ultimately be the one on the receiving end of Fisk's rage by the time this episode is over.
Matt startles Erik by coming out of nowhere and tells him to keep his head down, but like his wife said, he's a reporter at heart, so he doesn't listen. Matt mentions Gal's blind drug runners right here.
It makes sense. Nobody'd look at a blind man twice.
No, I wouldn't.
Ben also mentions that Matt sounds like a boxer, and in the comics, Ben figured out that Matt was Daredevil, and these are nods to the fact that Ben may already suspect that.
Ben heads home and gets another scare when Karen pops out at him. These two scares are really setting us up for the ending when the person in the shadows is an actual danger. Karen wants Ben to hurry up and publish the story. She's not willing to do it herself online because of what people will find when they dig into her past.
Foggy gives evidence to Marcy, who he boned down with in his despair. Her law firm, Landman and Zach, represent Fisk, so they have a lot of dirt on him.
Matt goes to the streets to use his senses to find one of Gal's runners. He follows a woman with a white cane. She gets picked up by a black car blasting classical music, another Bach tune, violin concerto in A minor. So he tosses aside his own white cane and parkours up the buildings to follow the Bach.
This run across the tops of the buildings is insane, especially since you know he's still pretty banged up. He passes by several water towers, just like the ones covered in blood in the beginning of the credits. He keeps pace with the car and makes it to Gal's warehouse, and the guards use a series of knocks to identify one another from outside the door. All this effort caused him to open up his stitches.
Fisk takes his mom out of St. Benezet to send her away to Italy. She doesn't want to go, saying the attendants at St. Benezet brought her a piece of supper every night, and you know Fisk was paying extra for that.
Ellison refuses to publish Ben's story. The resulting disagreement turns ugly, and Ben accuses Ellison of taking bribes from Fisk, and Ellison fires him.
Gal walks through her heroin operation, smiling like a proud mama. In another very cool long take, the camera follows her as she walks away from the Packers, and the camera swings up to the shadows, past a man with a cane, up to a guard playing a game on his phone. There's a thud outside the door. He leans in close to hear the knock signal. The guy goes outside, but the camera stays put, and we just hear the beating he takes before Matt's familiar black boots step inside in a low angle. The camera pans up and cuts back to the armed guard.
Matt walks among the blind Packers. Unlike Matt, their other senses aren't heightened, so they have no idea he's there until Gal shouts. Matt gets Gal alone and tries to strong-arm her, saying this.
You're gonna tell me about Fisk?
She wallops his ass with one punch and then hightails it out of there. Awesome. We get more of her being a badass in Iron Fist when she busts out some crazy Yoda fighting skills.
The warehouse burns and Matt helps save the workers, but it's a push. Gal's heroin is ruined and Matt has no leads on Fisk now. Brett Mahoney catches Matt in an alley, but Matt disarms him and tells him the truth about Fisk and the dirty cops in his precinct.
Gal meets up with Leland and we get the reveal that the two were responsible for the poisoning and that poison was meant for Vanessa to remove her as a distraction so Fisk would get back to the business as usual. Gal says she's leaving to visit her homeland, which is a considerable distance farther than China. She's talking about Kunlun, which is explored more in Iron Fist.
Ben brings his wife flowers and proposes they run away to Paris together. She encourages him to put the story he's been working on the internet because the world needs him to tell the truth any way he can. Ben calls Karen to tell her he's gonna publish a story online on his own tonight, and he's got a pep in his step after the talk with Doris.
Then we get to the absolute worst and best scene of this episode. Ben arrives home, takes a big drink, looks at a photo of him with Doris in the happier times, and starts to write, but the camera pans behind him to show Fisk is in the shadows.
At first, it seems like maybe Fisk is there just to threaten Ben not to write his story, calmly saying he'll leave after a conversation. But throughout this, Fisk's fingers fidget just like they do during his conversation with Matt in the Daredevil Born Again trailer. He's calm on the surface, but his hands always belie his true rage.
Ben doesn't blink, not daring to take his eyes off him for even a split second. Fisk drops this big fat uh-oh.
I'll go. Just one more thing. Were you alone when you spoke to my mother?
In episode 3, Silvio told Ben that when he went away to prison, Ben was the only one who reported on him without dragging his family into it. Ben had a code that he lived by. Here, it's Ben's interaction with Fisk's mother that's his undoing, and he's not even the one at fault. It's all Karen's doing. This episode started with the aftermath of Karen's murder and ends with a murder that she's essentially responsible for.
As soon as Fisk mentions his mother, Ben knows he's done. Fisk got this intel from his source of the bulletin, and we're still not sure if that's Ellison or not. But Ben protects Karen by claiming he was alone in this, and the resignation in his voice is just crushing.
Yeah. I was alone.
Fisk says he admires that he's a man of principle, but he can't forgive that Ben went after his mother.
I am not here to threaten you. I'm here to kill you.
Then Fisk screams as he brutally crushes Ben's windpipe with his bare hands. Ben's feet give one last death kick before going limp, and we hear a clock ticking as Fisk steps on the now shattered photo of Ben and Doris. Ugh.
Damn you, Fisk! All right, well, episode 13, titled Daredevil. The season 1 finale opens with Ben's funeral, presided over by Father Lantum. Many Rivers Across by Jimmy Cliff plays, and Ben's coffin is lowered into the ground, blocking out the sun.
Karen talks to Doris, who says Ben talked about Karen all the time and piles on Karen's guilt by saying if she and Ben had kids, Ben would have wanted one like Karen. It's interesting. We are going to get BB Erik on Daredevil Born Again. Probably not their daughter based off of this line, but could be like their niece or some other relative. But Doris also alleviates some of that guilt by saying no one would ever push Ben into a story he didn't want to do.
Oh, that's nice of her. Fisk finds out Gao and Leland poisoned Vanessa, and Leland's been stealing from him. Leland thinks he's safe because he has a trump card, Detective Hoffman. If he doesn't check in on him every 24 hours, Hoffman goes to the feds and tells them everything. But Fisk attacks him anyway and gets tasered, and it barely phases him because it's Fisk. He's like a boulder. It just pisses him off more.
You hurt her! Wait! You hurt Vanessa!
Every time Fisk loses it, he's yelling something. With his dad, it was keep kicking him. With Anatoly, it was you embarrass me in front of her. With Ben, it was my mother. And now it's you are Vanessa. That was my impression, which wasn't that great, but you get the gist. It just really hammers home again that Fisk is a little kid who can't control his emotions, having a tantrum. Someone needs to put this big boy in timeout.
Fisk throws Leland down an elevator shaft. Again, elevators! And he tells Francis to kill Hoffman. Matt's back at Fogwell's gym, hitting that bag right near the poster of the fight that ended with his dad's death. Foggy extends a tentative olive branch and tells him that Marcy has been copying classified legal documents for him on Fisk. Both friend is worried about the other. Matt's worried Foggy's digging will put a target on his back. Foggy's worried Fisk will obliterate Matt if they go head to head like he did the last time.
They talk to Mahoney, who's been looking into things since his run-in with the Man in Black. Matt listens in on the cop's phone call and realizes Leland had Hoffman stashes somewhere in the city. Foggy and Matt decide they've got to get him before Fisk does. After debating all season if a man like Fisk has to be brought down through the law or vigilante justice, they decide to try both.
Foggy brings up again how he could have been a butcher, and Karen's glad things are back to normal. And these guys are way too happy right now, so you know something bad's gonna happen soon. The three go over the papers Marcy smuggled out of Landman and Zach for any hint of where Hoffman might be, and they find a building owned by Leland's accounting firm that mysteriously disappeared from their record.
One of the guys watching Hoffman brings him a meatball sub from Marcioni's, the same exact meal Hoffman brought Blake when he went to the hospital to kill him. And just like Blake, Hoffman doesn't get to enjoy it. Fisk's dirty cop burst in, starts shooting, and their orders were to leave no survivors.
Hoffman closes his eyes, ready for a bullet to take him out, and the camera stays on him while we hear the sounds of a fight and multiple gunshots. Matt tells Hoffman to turn himself into Mahoney, and miraculously, this dude makes it to the 15th precinct alive. Stan Lee's photo is on full display behind the desk once again.
our dad. Matt and Foggy represent Hoffman and get him to testify on the record. At first, he stammers over Fisk's name since for so long, no one was allowed to say it out loud. Hoffman gives the names of cops, lawyers, judges, and a senator all in Fisk's pocket and cuts to a montage of arrests, starting with Turk and set to Luciano Pavarotti singing Nessun Dorma.
Time to say goodbye. After Turk, they arrested the cops we saw earlier. Mahoney smirks as he looks on. Then there's a fake out as it cuts to Ellison, but the FBI isn't there for him. They're there for his secretary, Caldwell. Caldwell? Eric's blood is on your hands, Caldwell. Next up is an attorney at Landman and Zach, and Marcy smiles as he's marched away, and she's like, haha, promotion time. And then they finally get to that old senator. And this whole sequence is reminiscent of the baptism sequence from The Godfather when Michael Corleone has all the heads of the other families killed. They have cleaned house.
Fisk knows he's next and tells Vanessa this.
I need you to do something for me. Listen very carefully.
It cuts to the feds rolling up, and as his door is busted down, he proposes to Vanessa.
Fisk is put in the back of an FBI transport van as reporters pummel him with questions about his criminal activities. Karen, Foggy, and Matt celebrate, and they toast to Ben and Mrs. Cardenas, but the celebration turns out to be premature.
In an armored van, Fisk repeats what he told comatose Vanessa, that he's not a religious man, but he's read bits and pieces of the Bible, and the Bible story he recites is Luke 10:30, the parable of the Good Samaritan, about a traveler who was set upon by men of ill intent who beat and robbed him. Various men of God pass by and don't help, but finally a Good Samaritan does. Fisk says he always thought he was a Good Samaritan, saying this.
It means that I'm not the Samaritan, that I am the ill intent who set upon the traveler on a road that he should not have been on.
D'Onofrio kills this line delivery, and the bong sound sting right in the middle there serves to strike fear as we realize this isn't over.
Yeah, and there's definitely a parallel here with like Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction, right? Someone reinterpreting the Bible passage and just kind of questioning what their role in the story is. And either way, it's some just kind of evil murderer trying to justify his own actions by just like ascribing some part of a Bible story to himself.
But he said he wasn't a man of the Bible.
Yeah, he knows. Okay. He knows what his role is, and he's not afraid to admit it. And it cuts to the road outside, the trucks and police cars, and they all jerk to a stop on a bridge, boxed in. Men in tactical gear jump out of the first truck and open fire.
Fisk switches vans, and the others in the garage are labeled Atris Plastics and Somerville Department Stores. They're both businesses from the comics, and they show up more in the Luke Cage series.
Matt has a surprise of his own. The suit Melvin's been making for him is ready. On Melvin's table is a blueprint for Gladiator's circular saw blade weapon. Oh, he loves that thing. So Matt puts on this new suit. It's his Daredevil suit and tracks Fisk down, repeating the words on the walkie that Fisk said to him over the walkie in episode 6.
Not everyone deserves a happy ending.
Matt takes out Fisk's guard and chases him down an alley. He says this.
I wanted to make this city something better than it is. Something beautiful. You took that away from me! You took everything! I'm gonna kill you!
Take your shot.
Take your shot! The exact same thing Fisk said to Mac back in episode 9 when they first fought.
Both of these guys are out for blood, and they're leaving everything on the table. Matt lands some punches, but Fisk picks up a metal pipe and wails on him, and if he wasn't wearing that new suit, he'd be done for. Matt uses his own batons to give Fisk a taste of his own medicine, but Fisk picks him up, King Kong style, and then slams him on the ground and continues to beat on him.
Fisk picks up Matt's sticks and absolutely loses it like he did when he was little, and he even compares Matt to his father, saying the city deserves to drown in its own filth with people like his dad and Matt. And for a minute, it looks like Matt's finished, but then this happens.
This is my city. My family.
That's the same bong sound that played earlier when it was revealed that Fisk actually had the upper hand. And here it signifies Matt getting the upper hand on Fisk. The Daredevil theme kicks in to hammer that home, and Matt knocks Fisk to the ground.
Fisk says that one man in a silly costume can't make a difference, and Daredevil, because that's who Matt fully is now, jump punches him right in the face, knocking him out. It's the victorious knockout his dad did in his last fight, except this one ends better for Matt than it did for his dad.
Mahoney shows up and lets Daredevil leave, but asks him what he should call him when he files his report. Vanessa slips on her engagement ring and then leaves in a helicopter with Francis.
On the front page of the New York Bulletin, there's the headline, Daredevil collars Fisk. Mystery figure brings an end to daring escape. I have to
what is it? The transatlantic?
Yes. And it's a accompanied by a surveillance camera photo of Matt in his black suit and a drawing of him in his red Daredevil suit. And this is taken directly from Alex Maleev's Daredevil Volume 2, number 60 cover art.
Foggy puts the Nelson and Murdock sign on the outside of their law office building and heads off to Marcy to find a new job. Matt tries to get Karen to tell him what's been bothering her, but she doesn't bite. Instead, they go inside Nelson and Murdock, and that opening door cuts to Fisk's cell door closing. He's finally in a white suit, but it's not the one from the comics, it's a prison jumpsuit. His cell is dirty and dingy and tiny, but at least he still has a white concrete wall to look at, you know, his new, like, rabbit in a snowstorm.
Yes, he sees it everywhere. He can see it everywhere.
He's just staring at that wall.
Is that page slightly chipping?
Oh, I wish I could make my eggs.
Daredevil stands over the city, guarding it, listening for trouble, and he hears a woman scream, just like the scream that he said really started it all, and he jumps off the roof to go do his thing. And that is the end of our Daredevil Road to Born Again rewatch of Season 1, and we're going to continue with Season 2, a big, beefy breakdown of everything in Season 2, where we're going to get Punisher, we're going to get Elektra, we're going to get some hand stuff. It's gonna be awesome. And again, great way you can support New Rockstars. Go check out that join button, and then you can join us as a channel member. And then over on nerdright.shop, we have shirts like this, our cool Daredevil and Punisher inspired design. You're wearing
I wanted to wear a death shirt because I was like, there's a lot of death in this first season. So let me remind you where they go.
And fun fact, now that Daredevil and all of this is like officially MCU canon, every time a character dies, Aubrey Plaza was there to claim them.
Literally. So it works. It works.
Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow me at EA Voss. Follow Jessica at
Lulu_Clemons.
Subscribe to all 3 channels in the New Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Road to Born Again.
We should buy masks.